What was the best karma is a beach moment you have witnessed? Happened to me at work. Methhead was trying to pay with like 1,000 coins for a $5 scratch off. She tried to say she was only 10 cents short. Ended up being over $1 short. Then complained and said any decent person would have spotted her the money. Pretty much told her she could go down the street and try there if she'd like. She pulled out a 20 and bought 2. As she walked out the store she said karma is a beach. When she gets to her car a cop pulls up behind blocking her in. They proceed to search the car then arrest her and her boyfriend. It was hilarious fact I read it, since people are curious about why they searched the car. There was more to the story, but I was typing it on my phone at work. There were 4 meth heads in total. She was just the only one that was giving me a problem. The cops showed up in the parking lot either already looking for these people or just by coincidence. They knew the car. It was beat up and pretty recognizable if you happen to see it. 2 of the guys saw the cops when they were outside smoking the cigarette while I was dealing with her. They came inside and went out the other door. She went back out to the car a few minutes later where the driver, her boyfriend I'm assuming, was already in the car. They searched it because they talked to them and their IDs and they both had warrants. They were already in handcuffs in the police car when they searched the meth head's car. I'm from San Diego, and during the summer, you have to acclaim bonfire pits on the beach really in the morning if you want it for that night. So my friends and I got to the beach at 8 AM and stayed there so we can get a bonfire going into the night. Just before sundown, this one couple asked if they could share the bonfire with us, and since our group wasn't too big, we decided to share it with them. However, that couple proceeded to bring a group of like 15 others, and they literally surrounded the pit and pushed us out. We were pissed, but we were so tired from being at the beach all day, so we decided to head out. Little did we know what that night had an extreme high tide warning, and when we moved all of our stuff over the wall that divided the beach walk with the beach, a huge wave came in and washed out that whole group surrounded by our bonfire. The wave flipped over their table of food, took a handful of sandals back into the ocean, and destroyed all their stuff. The best part was this one girl was trying to jump the wall to save herself, but she didn't jump high enough and ended up falling right back into the waters. Karma's a beach. I was working in a pub in Liverpool and had just arrived about 10 AM to start my shift. I knocked on the door and waited for someone to let me in. I became aware of some voices shouting and turned around to see 2 guys, shirts off, swaggering towards me talking in a language I didn't understand. They came right up to me and what little English they did speak came out. They called me a faking hoe and a faking beach etc. Nasty stuff and I was really quite scared. I was knocking on the door really hard at this point, but after insulting me and laughing they walked off towards a busy road. I watched as they walked out into the traffic waving their arms at the cars to stop for them then giving the drivers the finger. Suddenly one of the cars stopped and 4 big guys got out. One of the nasty dudes ran off, but the big man got caught and shoved hard against the car a couple of times clearly hurting his head and elbow. Then one of the car guys made out that he was going to punch him big time, drawing his fist far back. The little she just covered his face and screamed. They didn't get hit, but the car guys and a lot of passers-by burst out laughing. They let him go and he ran away. That felt good. I worked as a bartender at a bowling alley. For some reason one of the other bartenders hated me. She was constantly poaching people on my side, horseshoe-shaped bar, so we each got a side. We split tips, and whenever it was her turn to count them down I know she wasn't splitting them properly. Tried to get the scheduling manager to put her on my days, etc. One of my regulars even said she caught her pocketing tips and not putting them in our communal bucket while I was working with her. Well, tournament season started, which everyone dreaded / looked forward to. Dreaded because the shifts were 2 or 3 times as long as normal and there was a constant rush of people at the bar. Looked forward to because shifts were 2 or 3 times as long as normal and there was a constant rush of people at the bar, so we'd make as much in a day as we did in a week. Well, the first tournament was teams that she considered hers. They bowled on her side on days she worked, so she knew them well and was looking forward to their tournament tips. She came in saw that I was scheduled to bartend that day, and flipped out. She started ranting to the manager, who happened to be the scheduling manager, and the owner of the place happened to be standing there. The owner pretty much said I was one of the better bartenders, so I was getting put on the tournaments, and if she didn't like it, she could just leave. My coworker left, and then I got to work her normal shifts as well. My old manager was a monster. Belittled people, made a hostile environment, denied anything that would make coworkers happy, while giving himself every comfort, even denied me a half day to go to my mother's funeral, adding, "Would it be a big deal if you couldn't go?" He finally stepped on his dick after he wrote up a fictitious counseling statement about someone, and the entire office revolted. The manager wasn't fired like we wanted, but he was relieved. So, in comes the new manager. Very well regarded, 20-year Air Force veteran, retired at E9, humble guy who knew how to handle people. We have our first awkward team meeting, old manager bitterly in attendance, as the new manager is giving his nice to meet you speech. He sees the douchebag glaring around the table trying to intimidate people. He stops talking, pauses for a few seconds, and then says, "You know, when I was in the Air Force I learned that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you." He then stared directly at the old manager and said, "And if you don't take care of your people, they'll take care of you." My husband saw one like this recently. It was around 6 AM on a decently quiet road that leads to a highway. The guy behind him rode up on hubby's bumper, swerved to the right to pass, and less than a mile later had rear-ended a car sitting at a red light. Hubby stopped, stopped/stooped, and told the woman who was hit that he'd be willing to testify that the guy at fault was driving like a maniac, and gave her his info. That guy saw hubby pull over and talk to her, and shortly after hubby left, the asshole drove off without waiting for the police. Hubby spoke with the police about what the guy looked like and gave what descriptors he could of the asshole and his car. Hubby was blinded by the headlights and no one got the damn tag number. That guy's now on the hook for a hit and run, where the other driver was taken to the hospital. When I was younger we saw one like this too. Maniac driving at least 90 miles per hour on I-95 passing everyone and driving like an idiot. A few miles down the road his car is flipped onto its roof in the ditch next to the road. This was pre-cell phones, but someone had already stopped. I'm way late for this, but this is one of my favorite stories to tell. So, when I see a thread about karma, I can hardly resist sharing this one. I went to a small school of about 80 students. In my class there was 12. Although our numbers were small, we still had the classic bully archetype. Let's call him Christopher. Christopher was one of those kids who felt like he could do whatever he wanted to anyone else, and he would be absolved of all blame if he finished his routine with "it's just a joke." Basically, he was a grade A prick. Enter the second major character. There was also a mentally challenged kid in our class. Let's call him Todd. Now, Todd was fond of asking questions. It was just his own way of obtaining information. I know this might sound bad, but we got annoyed with him pretty soon. Hey, we were just kids. Now although Todd annoyed us, we still all looked after him and made sure nobody gave him shit. He was one of us. Sometimes that was a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. The karmic incident took place once when we were the oldest year in the school. We basically ruled the school, and naturally this power would go to our heads. And it corrupted nobody quite as much as Christopher. We were playing rounders, kind of a UK baseball, practicing for an upcoming competition. Split up into 2 teams, and made play each other. I was kinda mad, because Todd was on my team, and as you can imagine, he wasn't the most athletically gifted. Picture Kermit the Frog trying to run the 110-meter hurdles. That unathletic we were losing, due in no small part to the other team's superior members. I had lost interest, and only gave lackluster hits when it was my turn. Then it was Todd's turn. I watched, just to see how it would go, and I looked at the other team. Christopher was pitching the ball. He wasn't even giving Todd a chance. He'd throw the ball at his feet, and burst out laughing with his team. Babe Ruth couldn't have done a damn thing with those kind of throws. It went on for 3 minutes. Eventually his own team got sick of him and told him to give a decent throw so Todd could strike out and the game could progress. He throws it and Todd braces himself. We're all watching by now. Todd has tears in his eyes, the kind of thing humiliation does to someone like that. And as the ball draws closer, the world moved in slow motion for me. Point whack. Todd didn't just hit the ball with the bat, he fucking annihilated it. The bang was heard all over the school. It sounded like a bomb had gone off, localized entirely around the side of the bat point. So what does a ball do when it's met with a force like that? I don't know for sure, but in this case it went back towards Christopher at max speed. I didn't even see the ball on its way back. It was like a bullet from a pistol. When it got to Christopher, it hit him squarely in the eye. He fell down, out cold. One of his friends helped him inside, while the rest of us, both teams, cheered and laughed. We lifted Todd on our shoulders and gave him a hero's support. Point. He was no longer just Todd. He was Todd, the destroyer of us holes. I count this as a karma, but call it justice too. Beach deserved it. This happened a few years ago, and I had originally posted it under another account that has since been deleted. Point. I used to live a street or two behind a central suburban bus stop on top of a big hill, and I would take the bus every day to university, about an hour's bus ride away. Point. One morning I get on the bus and the bus pulls up to the intersection, waiting for the intersection lights to turn red, so it gets the green and pulls out. We get the green and start pulling out. Point. All of a sudden this primped up snooty middle-aged woman in a red suit, I still remember the details because it made me so mad, flew through the red light in her huge silver Cadillac going the same way that the bus was turning. Point. The bus driver had to slam on the brakes quite suddenly and then honked at the woman. The woman, who clearly intentionally ran the red because he was never down, flips the bus driver off and keeps speeding. The bus driver, this really jovial large black lady, cursed and carried on. Point. From the bus terminal to the city you drive down a really big hill before it flattens out in the valley. In the mornings/evenings cops like to patrol the intersection right at the bottom of the hill, especially because they can radar gun cars coming down the hill as the bus was, because there is a curve in the road, and if you're going too fast the cops can catch you before you have a chance to see them and slow down. Well, guess what happened? We get to the bottom of the hill and see that the cops had pulled over a silver Cadillac into the cross street and were issuing her a ticket. Point. The bus driver saw it and said, "Oh yeah baby," and pulled the bus over to the sidewalk near to where the intersection was and flagged down one of the cops he came on and asked what was up, and the bus driver asked if she had been caught speeding. The cop said she had, and the bus driver said, "Oh yeah. Is it still illegal to run a red light?" The cop laughed and said that it was, then asked her if the lady in the caddy had done that, and the bus driver said yes. The cop asks, "Well, we will add that to her ticket. Would you be willing to come in as a witness in court for that, then?" The bus driver said, "Honey, I get paid to go to court for stuff like this. It'd be my pleasure," and the whole bus started clapping. It was such a good day. I was working at a mental health facility for the elderly as a nurse, worked there for over a year with a perfect work record. Point. I worked for the same company at another elderly facility also for the same amount of time with a perfect work record. Point. My coworker found out I have PTSD and decided to tell my boss at the psych facility that I have PTSD, and the two together plotted to have me committed. Point. One day in October 2012, they launched their attack. I was working a 7 AM to 3 PM shift and doing very well for 2 hours when my boss called me into her office to congratulate me on 1 year service. When we were in her office alone, she started grilling me about my mental health and how it plays out at home. Next thing I know, she's forcing me to call my coworker who is off duty and making me go with her to the psych emergency because I have PTSD. The entire meeting was designed to stress me out and cause me to be triggered enough to behave poorly or crazy somehow to rationalize the next step, which was cart me off to emergency, and when they see me, they will instantly know I belong locked away in a padded room. Point. They didn't though. The hospital said I was fine, just stressed out about being forced to go to the hospital like a crazy person for no reason other than admitting I had PTSD. After the hospital let me go, my boss put me on extended medical leave without telling me and ignored all my calls for 2 weeks. Wrote letters lying about me to her bosses in the hours depth. I filed a union grievance and a complaint with a third-party whistleblower company for my company's head office. To hear about my boss lied about me to everyone. She said I told her I had a murderer in my head. That I was standing in front of mirrors with knives wanting to cut flesh. They believed her, so they shut down my complaints. I took it to the Human Rights Tribunal, self-represented against the largest long-term care provider in North America, and I faking won. Took 3 long years from incidents to end of court. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. My employer's health declined considerably by the time trial happened. She lost her job, she had to move to the mainland, and there is a forever public record about what she did. The coworker who helped my bosses in the permanent record and the employees of the job site were ordered to learn of what she and our boss had done to me and the outcome. She will never be comfortable at that job site again, and who/what she is known to all. I got the highest amount awarded for damages to dignity and self. I created a precedent for other PTSD persons with clean work history who do a good job on the clock, but have very real struggles with PTSD symptoms at home. No karma could possibly taste better than 40k and a clear reputation. Edit. Wow, thank you for the gold. We had a dance unit in my 7th grade gym class. The teachers decided that it was a good idea for everyone to do T-bow. My middle school ran like Mean Girls, and many were holding grudges for events that had occurred in the previous year. Old elementary school football rivalries were present. The nerdy kids loathed the jocks. The more popular girls were angry because of some major rumors that were going around at the time. The girls in smaller cliques secretly envied each other. The lowest of the middle school social caste system had it out for the bullies. It was chaos just waiting to explode. As 200 of us were crowded into the gym. Before us was a massive screen playing a Billy Banks T-bow DVD. At first, the T-bow exercise was relatively civil, but there were those kids who were just being pricks, kneeing people in the back, punching shoulders, and then acting like it was an accident. Attitudes shifted. You could feel the heat of the victim's anger and the testosterone levels skyrocketing. Suddenly, a few unpopular kids realized that gym class was requiring them to hit and kick. Their tormentors were getting away with using T-bow as an excuse to be jerks, and they shouldn't be the only ones to play that game. Perhaps, this time, they could evade the no tolerance policy and get away with dishing out some vengeance. Without warning, the entire gym erupted into a flurry of fists and flying feet. Girls who had been the verbal punching bag of their clique pulled hair and swiped at faces with fake nails. Kids who had been bullied day after day were dishing out black eyes like it was nobody's business. The sudden lashes of anger aroused the bitterness of the others, and the attacking spread like wildfire. The kids at the top of the social hierarchy and the well-known bullies were taken completely by surprise as the tables turned, and some even bolted for the doors. The gym teachers tried to stop the epic battle, but there were only 6 of them. Eventually, school security showed up to break up the fight. No one was formally punished that day, as you couldn't exactly punish 200 kids. Injuries ranged from bruises to broken teeth. Essentially, the middle school version of a peasant rebellion occurred, and the nobility got their ass kicked. Unfortunately, the issues were not cleared up in a single battle. Alliances only strengthened, and the neutral took sides, which led up to the Great Twitter War, which as far as I know, remains unresolved, though it effectively tore the school apart. I do a lot of sports betting, just to keep things a little more exciting. Nothing big, usually $10 on whichever team I want to win. Yesterday I was looking at the fight, and decided to see what my payout would be if I emptied the remaining money in my account. $84, on Rousey to win. Just under $5 payout. So then I decided to check the payout. If I went all in on Holmes, autopilot kicked it, and before I knew it, I had clicked place my bet going all in on Holmes. I don't even watch fighting, and was planning on seeing a movie last night, so I kind of just accepted the loss right then and there, and walked away from it wondering if I should throw some more money into my account, or take this as a lesson to stop losing money betting on the Niners. I know, I shouldn't bet on my own team, but it's fun when they actually do win. So anyways, I got home last night, hopped onto Reddit, saw the gif of Rousey getting her ass kicked, and enjoyed the easy $900 I made on a bet I had no intention of placing. Why the hell do people think they can justify stealing? Stealing is not okay, bad experience or not. Point also, I'm not directing this at you specifically, I only commented because you're one of many people from whom I've heard similar stories/sentiments. He was a dick, so I stole a $20 from his wallet when he went to the bathroom. The cashier was rude, so I took a Snickers on my way out. The service at the restaurant was slow, so I ate 3/4 of my food and planted a hair in the rest of it, and the manager comped it. The guy was stupid enough to leave his weed laying around, so I took the biggest nug to teach him a lesson. She was an annoying drunk, so I drank the rest of her bottle once she passed out. Stealing from corporations/big stores isn't really stealing. It's not like it directly affects anyone. This shit drives me crazy. Stealing is stealing. Don't faking steal. Point good for you learning from the experience. A lot of people never do. Throwaway, cause I've told this story IRL before. Edit format. A number of years ago, my then boyfriend and I were at our local dive bar having a few beers mid-afternoon as usual. All is good until this petite chick with a rockin' body strolls in and very blatantly is flaunting her sheet to every guy there, including my boyfriend. I'm a decade older than her. I'm like, whatever. As long as she doesn't actually come over, actually try this sheet up close personal. Let her have her fun, cause days when you feel this good about yourself are far few. Eventually, every guy is so distracted that the whole place is completely malfunctioning. The bartender is too busy flirting with her that he doesn't keep our beers coming as usual, and my opponent at the pool table is not mentally present. The game is becoming a cakewalk. Now I'm annoyed. Of course anything I say will sound like I'm jealous, envious, so I say nothing, seethe silently, salvage what I can of my happy hour. Cue karma. She sashays up to the bar again in her tall wedges and miniskirt, climbs on top of the stool, kneels on the stool, leans forward toward the bartender. No panties. Sexy? Only if you like the sight of a bloody tampon string hanging out. That next beer was especially satisfying. Delicious. Druffier once was a cute little thing, distraction and chaos she'd bring with her big buxom hoot as she flaunted her cooter that was adorned with a big bloody string. At work about 6 weeks ago. It's 4 AM and we're waiting for a delivery. A drunk black guy, relevant just wait, comes up and starts yelling to open the door so he can exchange done empty bottles for some more beer. Now there's like 3 things wrong here. We don't open for another 4 hours. He's obviously intoxicated. We can't legally sell to him anyway. His behavior would have gotten him kicked out of his store. Even if we were open, we inform him that he can't buy beer and that he can't hang out in front of the store because we are waiting for the delivery. Now, he wasn't the first person to try to buy from us that morning. The other guy, white, when asked to leave politely did with an apology. This second guy starts screaming at us, threatening us and saying, "It's cause I'm an Edgar." So, for our safety we stayed locked in the store and called the police. He wound up leaving and we never saw the cops. Fast forward about 35 days. He comes strolling into the store like nothing had ever happened. I mention that he's no longer allowed in the store and he's in a world of confusion. I had to explain to him what he had done, to which he said something along the lines of, "Well, that explains why I wound up in jail for 35 days. I live in a college town and my room is, and I plan to throw a rager on my birthday. We had just finished setting up and started playing music and drinking. It was around 11 PM and there were maybe 20 people already partying. The party was slowly gaining life when we heard knocks on the door and saw flashlights through the blinds. I knew it was the cops, but thought to myself that it was way too early for them to be busting us. I go outside to talk to them, and as I open the door I see 2 officers and my neighbor. Everyone inside immediately leaves while one of the cops is writing me a ticket. The neighbor approaches me and tells me that we can't be doing these types of things because he has kids. I was already pissed off because I have to go to court, but there was nothing I could do. The party was dead. Whatever. Fast forward a couple months, my roommate runs into me with a worried look on his face and says you have to come outside right now. I ask what's going on, but he doesn't tell me. I go outside and there are cops everywhere. They were in the alley hiding behind sheds and dumpsters while holding assault rifles. I go to the front of the house and there are cops cars everywhere along with a huge black vehicle that looks like a tank. The street is closed off and I'm pretty freaked out at this point because I didn't know what was going on. Then guys in full camo armor bust into the neighbor's house and drag him out. Apparently they had a search warrant because he was selling drugs right from his house where he had his kids. That's karma. Instant karma is delicious. This will get buried, but I still love this story. I had to use a 4-lane road to commute to and from work, 2 lanes each way. There was an intersection where I would always get the red light. During rush hour, I might have to wait through a few cycles before I could get through the intersection, mainly because the left lane didn't get a green arrow to turn, and it would cause a backup point. One day I was waiting my turn to get through this intersection. It was a nice day, so I had the window open. 2 guys pulled up in the next lane. There was a lot of traffic that day, so for 3 light cycles, these guys starting talking major shit to me, calling me a slut, telling me that wanted to F me, eat me, wanted me to suck them off, shit like that. Ignoring them did not dissuade them, and I eventually talked a little shit back. Finally, it was my turn to go through the intersection. Traffic unwinds. I start to take off. The guys in the next lane also take off so they can stay even with me and scream more crazy shit at me. Problem was, the car in front of their lane was taking a left. Their lane was not moving. I take off right as they rear end the brand new Jag in line in front of them. The best part was the super loud Nelson Muntz haha I yelled at them when they hit that car because they heard that shit and looked sad. Still makes me laugh every time I think about it. I was once walking home from the grocery store when I lived in California. It was a rather nice day, high 70s, only a few clouds, and this was in a town rather than a big city, so there wasn't much pollution in the air. There were some fairly attractive girls sitting at a table, enjoying some Cold Stone ice cream they had bought from the Cold Stone right next to the store. Point as I walked along the sidewalk, right next to the parking lot, a guy in a large, tricked out, gas guzzling truck decided to try and impress the girls. How? Obviously if he showed what a good driver he was, he would somehow be able to make their panties drop from the weight of being so wet. Well, he drove up to the parking lot exit and stepped on the gas. His intention seemed apparent. He would burn some rubber onto the road, make a sharp turn, and speed off, thus impressing the ladies, and maybe he would come back from them. Point well, he started his rubber burn, as myself and the ladies turned and looked. None of us were impressed with this blowhard in his giant truck. Why would he think that would impress people? However, this did not deter him, as he sped onto the road, his tires smoking, and sharply turned right to show his awesome driving skills, and then his rear right tire promptly exploded, leaving the rim to smack and grind against the pavement, bringing his attempt to a halt. Well, the 3 girls had quite a bit of enjoyment from that, and the guy sat there in his truck, fuming, trying to think of something to blame for his now disabled truck. But there wasn't any. It was his fault, and only his fault, and worse yet, it was right in front of the girls he wanted to impress. Now he was only depressed. TLDR. Guy in giant truck blows his tire before he can get blown. I have a farm in Africa. I'm not joking. I'm African with a large extended family. It's a small farm, family land for several generations. My cousins who live there are pretty much subsistence farmers. They eat what they grow, mostly corn, maize. And there is a pond we fill to fish farm when it is not too dry. But it had been very wet, and it has silted up. Anyway, I'm visiting them, helping fertilize the field before planting. Now by fertilize I mean the good stuff, nothing from Monsanto, but 3 months of dung accumulated over winter. All of a sudden a big Land Rover pulls up, full of tourists. I think they were English by their accents. They are lost, trying to get to a resort far away. We give directions. They don't like that we have told them a long route. It really was the correct route. They tell us that the Land Rover can go through anything and want to cut through the field. They offer to pay us. Well, would any farmer allow such a thing? We say no. At some point they just take off and drive right into the muddy pond that is hard to see because it's overgrown this time of year. Land Rovers are wonderful for off-road, but several feet of mud and vines and weeds. They swirl and turn and back up, just getting more stuck. Finally they emerge on foot through the mud. We are so shocked we can't even laugh until later. They walk up to us and sheepishly ask to hire a car. We charge them well. Also charge the towing company that came to get their car. My cousins made a tidy sum. It is now the family joke that we should be growing tourist cars instead of maize and fish. Edited, Clarity. When I worked at a prison as an officer, an inmate who locked a boy in a box in the woods and repeatedly raped him was scheduled for release. His now adult victim successfully campaigned the state to utilize an underused law that allows sexual predators to be kept under incarceration to be treated if they meet certain criteria. His story was highlighted on Dataline. A few weeks after having his story broadcasted on Dataline, the inmate was moved into general population. He was placed into a cell with a younger inmate who had a violent history and was sexually abused as a child. A few hours after being locked down for the night, the younger inmate used the intercom in his cell to alert staff that he had killed his cellmate. Staff opened up the cell to find the inmate beaten to death. Here is a link to an article about it. Keep in mind the author is a high-profile inmate himself, and his bias shows. Here is a response by the dead inmate's victim, who also is understandably biased. Catching the train home late one night, I was awoken by a group of loudmouthed drunk guys shouting racist slurs to anyone that looked even a little bit non-white. Another passenger starts telling them to shut up or get the fuck off the train when these guys flip out and start screaming at him. At this point another guy, who happens to be black, tells them to calm down and they start screaming at him that they are going to kick the shit out of him. At this point a few other guys on the train are starting to get up and move towards these idiots. Then the black dude gets up. It turns out he was slouching in his chair pretty seriously because he is a faking monster. He actually had to turn side on to move past the little handrail in the middle of the train. His shoulders were so big. At this point he puts his hat back on, which has transport security written on it in large letters. He hits the intercom button to signal the train guard and tells them to arrange police at the next station, then just walks up and grabs one of the guys and tells him ever so calmly he just wanted to get home after a long shift, so they all better behave really well because he is losing his patience fast. Everyone starts cheering the security guy and yelling at the idiots, who are then escorted from the train at the next stop. It was beautiful. Super late to the party, but here I go. This isn't my story, it's my dad's. Back in the day, my dad went to college, and his particular dormitory had around 15 floors. There was this dude, we'll call him Chester, who lived in the center apartment on the 14th floor, facing the north side. This meant that Chester's window was located directly above the entrance to the dormitory. Chester, being the ashat he was, would come home from school and wind down by throwing water balloons at the people walking into the building. Not even people he particularly hated or anything. Chester just did this to everyone for fun. One day, he hits my dad. Big mistake. My dad and his friend bring a garbage can up 15 flights of stairs, head to the bathroom, and fill it with water. They then head up to his friend's dorm, which happens to be the center dorm on the 15th floor. Right above Chester's, a couple of girls walk up the steps to the door. Chester leans out of his window, prepared to throw the balloons, and is promptly hit with an entire garbage can of water. Last year I was driving and got caught in an ice storm. It was warm outside one moment, and within a few minutes everything was covered in ice. My dad was supposed to be leaving his house soon driving an RV. So, I called to warn him not to leave, while I continued to drive 5 miles per hour on the rumble strips to the next exit, which thankfully had a Walmart for me to hang out in. While I waited for the storm to pass, there were cars wrecked all over the road. It looked like a scene from The Walking Dead where all the cars are wrecked on an abandoned road. I was afraid to pull over and help anyone for fear of getting stuck myself. or worse, getting rear-ended by another out-of-control vehicle. I quickly ended the call with my dad, because talking on the phone and driving is dangerous to begin with, but also because there were 2 cars coming up behind me going about 60 miles per hour. Apparently, they were both oblivious to the dozens of wrecked automobiles on the side of the road. I had just finished the sentence, "I have to get off the phone, Dad. People are driving like idiots," when the 2 cars passed me and slammed into each other, skittering off to the side of the road. I feel like an asshole, but I kept driving. But I did see 2 guys get out shaking their fists as I was driving by, so I'm assuming that they were okay. Back in October 2012. 10th grade, I bought my 3DS in order to play Pokemon X. 5 days later, it was stolen from my locker in Pearpoint. Next day, I tell my friend about what happened and told me he might know who did it. Following day, a kid I never met claimed to have found it. Turns out, he was the thief my friend described earlier in that morning who stole it and tried to sell my own device back for a reward for doing a good deed. The device was in terrible condition and he tried to lie about the game was missing. Fortunately, it was not, but I was still pretty pissed about the device. I cussed him out and refused to give him the reward. He then has the nerve to tell me to go fuck myself. I reported this to the police in the school, who didn't do jack shit about the situation at first, but a few days later caught the kid after he tried to steal an iPad. Afterwards, he's forced to buy me another new 3DS. Fast forward to November, the week after Thanksgiving. He's expelled for another failed robbery and I'm just, neat. Coming home from dinner with my wife one night, we get off the freeway at our exit. At the bottom of the ramp is a 2-lane stoplight, so you can go left or right, and just to the left is the freeway entrance, so if you U-turn out of the left lane, you'll get right back on. This dude behind us had been tailgating for miles, and I grumbled when he did it all the way down the exit ramp and nearly rear-ended me as we stopped for the light. Then he decided the light was taking too long, pulled into the right-hand turn lane next to us, and proceeded to put a U-turn right in front of us around back towards the freeway entrance, while the light was still red. My jaw dropped. Just as he completed his U-turn, the car that had been behind him pulled around us similarly, with red and blue lights flaring up to illuminate the intersection. And to top it all off, the officer lit up his speaker with, "That was really stupid. Pull over now." The idiot was just pulling into the shoulder as we merrily turned left on the green light and headed for home. So a few years ago, me and some friends went to Hookerville. For those who don't know, it's a 3-day long hippie fest in Ohio. On the first night we are all having fun and tripping our faces off. Around 2 AM as the trip from the shrooms I ate is coming down, a guy stumbled over to our tent area. Now this guy was all sorts of faked up. He said he had eaten some tabs and some shrooms, so he provides to piss next to our tent. As he is pissing, we are telling him to stop and that he is pissing in our Cheetos. He has a moment of clarity and realized what he was doing, and instead of saying he was sorry, just kinda shrugs it off and leaves. So about an hour later he shows back up and sits down. At this point he is tripping so hard he is faster faking God. So he sits and is real quiet. Then out of nowhere he goes, "I faking love Cheetos," grabs a pissy bag and starts eating the piss-soaked Cheetos. My friends and I just kinda look and share a nod of approval and let him keep eating. "Hey, guys, these Cheetos are all soggy and cheaty." That was the last thing he said to us before he disappeared into Tent City. TLDR ate some shrooms with some friends at a festival. Guy pissed in our Cheetos. Guy ends up eating his own piss. After my sister passed, we found out that my psycho niece, always despised her, had been physically and mentally abusing her for months. She didn't leave any visible signs and my sis was so ill she couldn't tell anyone. My freak of a brother-in-law was never a secret that I hated him too. Not only knew about it, but covered it up and lied to the authorities when questioned about how she had gotten the multiple injuries. 6 months after my sister passed, the bastard brother-in-law had a brainstem stroke. He is paralyzed below the neck and can't speak. 2 years after my sister passed, the beach niece was in a horrible car accident and ended up as a resident in a rehabilitation hospital for 28 months. During that time she was raped daily by a hospital employee, but her injuries were such that she was unable to tell anyone what had happened until a few years later. An examination showed that she does have a lot of damage, but she couldn't ID him. I visit them both often to remind them of the words I said when we found out what they had done to my beloved sister. You will answer to God for what you've done once you're dead, but you know that beach karma? She gets you while you're still alive. I already have my front row seat reserved, so I can watch whatever it is she has in store for you up close and personal. Driving on I-10 in Houston in very heavy traffic. I'm coming up to the exit for downtown. About 2 miles before the exit, they're in an on-ramp that merges into the far right lane. I'm in this right lane, and a guy in my lane a few cars back decides to jump in the merge lane to cut in front of a few cars, myself included. I said fuck that, your time isn't more valuable than mine, so I veered to the right so he couldn't line jump. Point traffic starts to flow again, and I'm coming up on the downtown exit, which is my destination. Asshole decides to asshole and pass me on the shoulder because Murica. Well, as he pulls up next to me and flip me the bird, he isn't watching the road and brushes up against the concrete guard on the right side, knocking off his passenger side mirror. We both exit for downtown, and the first light is red. I pull up next to him as he's absolutely busting at it in rage, slamming his steering wheel and gesturing at me. I couldn't contain my laughter, which made him even more raggy. Point. That was a good day. Mine is pretty simple, but it was hilarious. I like to hike, and sometimes trails have a lot of people on them. This one trail I was hiking was fairly crowded, and there is generally an understanding between people hiking that you try to make as little noise as possible so that you don't ruin the experience for others. This one kid was walking with a girl, and he looked a bit out of place, but he kept on trying to help her when it looked like she was doing just fine. All of a sudden his phone rings, and he picks it up. Point. The gist of the conversation went like this. Hello, yeah, Heather is here with me. I'm protecting her and keeping her safe. He loudly said so everyone around us could hear him, and there was no sarcasm in his voice at all. Point. As soon as those words got out of his mouth, he slipped on something and ate shit and began to roll down the hill for a good 10 to 15 feet. It took him a few moments to find his phone, and Heather had to help him up. Point. It was glorious. When I was 7, I had this really terrible babysitter. She would call 911 and yell help into the phone and then hang up really quickly, and would also regularly forget to make us dinner. The worst was she would always invite her boyfriend over so that they could make out on the couch and watch movies. Classic teenage shit. Every time he was over, she would lock me in my room and lock my 5-year-old autistic brother in the basement. He didn't understand how locks or light switches worked, so he cried pretty much the entire time. One day after Christmas, I took my new point and shoot camera out for a spin, pretending I was a detective. I would creep along walls and jump around corners, snapping away at whatever I could find. I could hear my babysitter talking to her boyfriend on the phone, so I thought I would investigate. I crept up to the kitchen and then swung around the corner, snapping away in my camera. She got really angry and chased me around the house as I was laughing my head off. Point. The next week my mom takes me to get my film developed. Her and I sat down in the mall food court and looked at the pictures, because what mom wouldn't want to see the pictures their son took with their Christmas present. As we flipped through, my mom snatched one of the pictures out of my hand and her face went red. My mom was holding photographic proof of my babysitter going through my mom's purse. I've never seen my mom light anyone up as bad as she did that poor 16-year-old girl. Point. TLDR had a demon babysitter that treated my brother and I like shit, became an ace childhood detective, and provided my mom with photographic proof that ended up getting my babysitter fired. I'm from Minnesota, but lived in Illinois for a while. There was a snowstorm. I was in the left lane doing about 30 in a 55 because the roads were that bad. I had someone doing about the same speed right next to me in the right lane. Behind us is a woman in a small SUV, CRV or something like that, bouncing from lane to lane behind us, honking her horn. As we come to a red light, the guy next to me turns right and the woman moves next to me. She rolls down her window and starts yelling at me. I lowered my window here. If you don't know how to drive in the snow, get the fuck off the road, some of us have places to go. Or something to that effect. I don't remember word for word. The light turns green and she speeds off like a bat out of hell. She gets up to speed, and as she approaches the next red light hits her brakes and slides on the snow right into the car in front of her. I stopped and went right up to her window and asked if she was okay. She nodded her head dazed, and I said, "If you don't know how to drive in the snow, get the fuck off the road. There is a lesson in that story. Four-wheel drive only helps you move forward, not stop or turn." Well, I was the karma in this story, but I think it still belongs here, and I've been waiting for the right time to share this story. I dated my first boyfriend for a year and a half, my senior year of high school and freshman year of college. He was a real sheetbag and I stayed with him anyway, because I clearly lacked the self-respect to leave the very unhealthy relationship, but I digress. One day, said boyfriend and I were taking a shower together. Boyfriend gets this devious look on his face and asks in a sweet voice if he can have a hug. I asked him suspiciously what he's up to, and he claims he just really wants a hug. So I say, "Oh, that's sweet. Okay." Of course I give him a hug, and he squeezes me tightly, so I can't pull away, and he starts laughing. I ask what's so funny, and he tells me that he is pissing all over me. I was pissed. This is not the first time this motherfucker had peed on me unsolicited. He was just one of those guys that loved to fuck with other people. The last time he did it, I had told him that if he did it again he would regret it. He didn't believe me. Fast forward to 10 minutes or so into the shower. I have been patiently waiting for him to wash his face. He grabs the face wash, and I bend down. He asks what I'm doing, and I tell him I'm going to shave my toes. He says inquisitively, "You shave your toes?" And I said yes, all women do. Ask any one of us. He accepts my answer and starts sudsing up his face. I pop a squat and hover directly over his foot and I bogoyer a big fat Cleveland steamer onto his foot. He stops sudsing and says, "We'll call me Karen." "Karen, what is on my foot?" I'm silent because I'm exploding with laughter and trying to muffle the sound so he doesn't know what's going on. "Karen, what is on my foot? Why is it warm?" I'll let some laughter slip, and then a little bit more laughter. He is getting angry now. He has figured it out, but he doesn't want to believe it. "Karen, what the fuck? What is on my foot? I swear to God, you did not seriously." He kicks his foot and flings the brown baby at the wall of the shower and I lose it. I'm dying laughing, and he is screaming, "Are you fucking kidding me, Karen? Get it out. Get it the fuck out of the shower." I am not opening my eyes until it's gone. So I pretend he scoop it out and flush it, but I didn't really. I left it there. I wanted him to see it. I tell him it's gone, and he opens his eyes. My Hershey squirt is looking into his eyes, into his soul, where nothing is left but fear and horror. He instantly bends over at the waist and starts violently puking up the big pancake breakfast we had just eaten. I'm laughing harder than ever now. He is screaming at me through his bouts of heaving to get the dirt out of the shower. So I finally comply. I pull it out with some toilet paper, flush it down the toilet, and then nope the fuck out of there because the hot shower steam is now filling the room with the pungent smell of his vomit. I go upstairs and finish my shower in the other shower and eventually hear footsteps approaching the top of the stairs. I cower into the corner, wondering what fate shall befall me for cheating on a grown man unsolicited. He pulls back the shower curtain and gives me a look that says he is trying really hard to be angry at me, but he knows it was hilarious and he deserved it, and he can't really be mad. He says he's going to get me back by pissing in my mouth while I'm sleeping, but I remind him that I'm not scared to take it to the next level and cheat in his mouth as retaliation, and it would probably be best for him to just quit while he's ahead. He agrees and he never got me back. Now that I cringe when I look back on our relationship, because I never should have dated the piece of shit for as long as I did. I still have that sliver of happiness and justice, and I think yeah, he was a terrible boyfriend, but at least I got to take a shit on him. If I ever get Alzheimer's and forget my friends, forget my family, forget my college memories and funny work stories, I hope the thieving disease will at least leave me with this one beautiful memory, so I can go to my grave with a smile on my face and the joy of justice in my heart. Not me, but my parents. They got pregnant while my mom was still in high school and were from a very conservative southern farming community where word spreads like wildfire. A teacher at my mom's school started openly talking about my parents' act of adultery to students, calling my mother a hoe and condemning her to hell, telling the students to never be like her. It was a bad time for her. It got so bad that my dad, who was out of school, came into the high school one day and laid it down to the teacher. How dare she judge his wife? She is being a terrible Christian by judging my mother and preaching how terrible of a Christian my mom had been. That their home life was none of the teacher's damn business. As my dad left the room, the teacher left him with the final thought. The only thing that would make me more disappointed and ashamed of my children would be if they were dirty homosexuals. 20 plus years later, my parents are happily married and all 3 of the teacher's children have come out as gay. Fuck yeah. I was once at a friend's house. His mom was dating this asshole with anger issues. I was infamous for cooking at this friend's house and making a big mess. I was 11 and his mom was rarely home. This one instance, my friend was upstairs in the bathroom and I was making soup. Just as his mom's boyfriend walks in, I pick up the soup pot and the handle cracks right off. The pot falls with a clang and a buttload of split pea floods the kitchen. The boyfriend lowers his head and starts charging at me like a bull. I was terrified. This was the only time an adult had ever attacked me. He takes about 1.5 running steps towards me before I hear squeak. Down he goes, as first, right into the huge puddle of soup. He slid a couple more feet until his head hit the side of some floor level cabinets. I kind of leaped over / around him and jetted up to my friend's room, locking the door. Late to the party, but this one is too funny not to share. This is one I hesitate to tell because I'm not sure I'd believe it if I heard it from anyone else. When I went back to college some years ago, the school I attended was well known for their seminary program. Since I went to a school known for their seminary program, he promptly started calling me preacher. That was fine with me, but this guy was a bit of a douche. He liked to intimidate people, and if you wouldn't back down, I wouldn't. He would find ways to make your life harder than it needed to be. Whenever I would call him on it, he would make a joke about it. I wouldn't pick on a preacher man like you. I might catch a lightning bolt or something. This had happened so many times I stopped thinking about it until one fateful night. He pushed a little too hard and I got in his face a little more than was wise. He wrote me up. Normally I would stay a bit late and help him shut things down. No third shift. This night I left as soon as my shift was over and let him deal with things by himself. That night there was a bunch of thunderstorms and tornadoes. It was the night that a big one tore a mile-wide swath through OKC. For those of you old enough to remember, it was an intense night, even though none of the really rough stuff got within 15 miles of me. I vividly remember water blowing in around the seals of the patio door of my apartment. Anyway, I'd cooled off by work the next day. Normally I'd check in with the boss first thing. He wouldn't talk to me. He muttered something and stomped off as if he was upset. Have you ever been in a group of people who all seem to be in on some huge joke, but you can't seem to figure out what's so funny? That's the vibe I got that night. When I finally got a chance to ask about it, I was thrilled to find out that the boss's conversion van was struck by lightning on his way home that night. Now we pulled a lot of pranks on each other, so at first I didn't buy into it, but it turned out to be true. It struck the chrome luggage rack thing on the top and burned a hole in the roof. It flattened both back tires and made mincemeat of quite a few things in the electrical system. He traded it off a few days after getting it out of the shop. By then he'd already had a few fuses blow for no apparent reason, and I had to fix a wire going down to the starter solenoid so he could go home that night. I do not make any claims of divine intervention, but I'm not sure he was willing to take that chance. He only got loud with me one time in the month or so I had left there. When he did, our QC guy piped up and said you'd better leave him alone. That last one was just a warning shot. The boss scowled and shot him a dirty look, then stomped off. TLDR boss called me preacher and kept making my job harder than it needed to be. He made jokes about getting hit by lightning and then got hit by lightning while driving his van. BMW driver tailgating me. Typical stereotypical tailgater, middle-aged woman with blonde-dyed hair. On her phone. We're on a public road where the speed limit is 35, so that's how fast I was going. Just for the record, before people assume I was driving like an old lady. Another note, the whole time this happened, there was a single dotted yellow line, so she could have passed me when oncoming traffic was clear, which it was many times. So here I am, doing 35, when this woman comes up behind me pretty fast in my rearview mirror. I see it, and she's coming up pretty damn fast, so I brace for impact. I usually have my phone on a GPS mount, plugged into the cigarette lighter port, to function as a sort of dashcam, so it would have provided enough evidence if she did hit me. Point anyway, she doesn't hit me, but she's hanging close enough, so I can't see her headlights, which was pretty damn close, because she had her high beams on, at 11 AM too. Go figure. Waving her hand at me through my mirror telling me to speed up, practically shouting, all while on her phone. This goes on for a couple miles. Then, we get to the section of the road that's got road work going on. They're busy repaving the road, but this was the workers' day off or something. Point up ahead, I see a manhole port that's jutting out of the ground an inch or two. This particular manhole isn't centered properly, with 3/4 of it in my lane. Since the road was under construction, the manhole was now above the surface of the road, and thus meant you had to swerve a bit to avoid it. So, taking a rather large risk, at the last possible moment, my little nimble Civic is able to swerve around it and avoid touching it. Unfortunately for the woman, she didn't have enough time to react. She hit it and spun out. Her front left tire had blown out too, which doesn't surprise me, because she had opted for the M Sport package on her BMW. Low profile tires. Lesson of this story: don't tailgate. If the driver in front of you has to go around something, that's literally no time to react. Also, it's a douche move. So this isn't the best, but it was recent. Point: lady walks in, wants to buy a product. Spend time with her giving the pros/cons. She has a product she wants to trade in toward whichever she chooses. Give her the offer. Tells me it's too low. It was actually really high. She paid $440 for it, and I offered $300 trade. Any other place would have offered $250. She goes to check another store and calls asking if we would match price. I told her it depends on the price. They were selling it like $9 above cost. They are a new store and I think they are having troubles. Told her I couldn't do that, but she should jump on it. She wanted to know if I would buy it still, cause that store doesn't do trade/buy. Told her no, just the trade, which was true, cause if she was buying something I was willing to take something I normally don't take. She gives her, oh well, guess we can't do business. She comes in asking if we would still do the trade and someone else was buying it and it was a last one. Serves you right for being cheap and not realizing a good deal. Karma is so sweet. Late to the party, but I really want to tell this story to people. Point: TLDR, don't starting shouting at people just because you think you have a higher rank. Experience counts. I work in a law firm. This story involves a clerk, junior lawyer and senior lawyer. The clerk, 15 years work experience, was tasked by the junior lawyer, 5 years work experience, to go to a property and basically take account of all the items in the property, which will be sold at an auction, because the tenant had not paid our client, who is a landlord. On the day, the tenant informs the clerk that he wants to make payment now and not to close his business. The clerk then just needs to get in touch with the landlord to inform of this fact. Clerk informs the junior lawyer of this, and the junior lawyer goes off and starts shouting at the clerk on the phone to just do his job and to ignore the tenant. Point: the clerk does not want to wrongfully lock up the premises. Finally, the clerk gets hold of the landlord and the landlord agrees to accept payment. So the clerk comes back to the office and the junior lawyer is shouting at the clerk for not following instructions and taking so long and whatnot. He was shouting for a good hour or two, saying the clerk did not know how to do his job and to follow instructions. When we come back from lunch, senior lawyer was in the office and hears of the story. So the rest of the day until quitting time was the senior lawyer shouting at the junior lawyer, because apparently if the person wants to pay, you have to accept payment. If you do not, it would be considered wrong for you to lock up the premises. Further, the tenant can then sue for loss of profit and damage to business reputation. The clerk knew this as he has been doing this for 15 years. The junior lawyer thought he knew better, just because he was a lawyer. Fastest and best example of karma I have seen. I don't know for certain that it was the same vehicles involved in both incidents, but one time I was driving on the motorway approaching my junction in the left lane, so I could get off, UK, driving on the left. A large white car nipped in the rather small gap between my and the lorry behind, then onto the hard shoulder, which is not for driving, it's where you go if you need to stop in an emergency, egg a puncture or engine trouble, while on the motorway. Undertook me on the hard shoulder, cut me right up pulling in front of me, then jinked right into the middle lane, and cut someone else up. I braked when he cut me up, so I wouldn't hit him, and could make more space in case he braked suddenly, which reduced the gap between me and the lorry behind, but opened more space in front of me, which a second car, this one a black BMW, immediately cut into, and used to undertake a car in the middle lane. It seemed the white car and the black BMW were racing. Incident over. I got off the motorway half a mile later at my junction, M6 junction 12, and continued on my journey. About 45 minutes later, when I was almost home, the travel news came on. The M6 southbound was backed up from junction 11A right up to junction 13, following a crash involving a BMW about 40 minutes earlier. Junction 11A is about a mile further on than junction 12. Either the two cars who were racing were directly involved in the accident, or they caused it. Barry from my college English class decided it would be fun to fact me over. I always did my papers ahead of time, and us being friends, he knew I kept them in my backpack during the few days before they were due. So, final essay is due the next day. Barry takes my paper when I'm not looking, scans it, faking changes the name on it in Photoshop. Not only that, he changed the name to his name and then crossed it out, hand wrote my name, and sneaked the paper back in my backpack. Then he turned in the altered copy with his name a day early, saying he had to miss class the next day due to a family emergency. Then I didn't even think twice and turned my paper in the following day. Yes, the one where it looks like I took Barry's essay, scribbled out his name, and wrote mine over it. I got an F. I didn't know what to say while trying to explain myself, and the professor told me the only reason she wasn't escalating this was because this was the stupidest attempt at cheating that she had ever witnessed. So, yeah, karma is a beach. I guess it finally caught up me, because the week prior he had found out that I was sleeping with his fiance for 6 months during their engagement while dating his best friend. Posted this on a separate karma question, not realizing this one existed. This happened last night. My friend and I are waiting in one of 2 long lines to buy bingo cards at the casino. There's a group a few spots ahead of us, and frankly, they're obnoxious as hell, talking over each other, meaning they're getting progressively louder, laughing a little too hard at each other's jokes, making comments about how long the cashier is taking, etc. A couple minutes after we first get in the line, 3 of their friends show up to join them, cutting in front of a dozen or so people in the process. The group says nothing, the rest of the line says nothing, and the cutters just stand there and make small talk with the friends they're meeting. At some point I want to say something to them, but I also don't want to start shit with a big group of assholes, so I settle for pointing them out to my friend. She smiles and shrugs, and I think that's the end of it. Then, the cash only guy comes out from behind the counter and starts selling cards to people waiting in line. My friend and I buy our cards and are walking into the bingo hall when we hear, "What the fuck? Are you serious? This is faking ridiculous." Turns out, they closed the line we were in just before the cutters and their friends were about to get their cards, and they ended up at the back of the other line. Hell yes. Driving on a 2-lane toll highway, as whole driver can't pick a lane. At least 3 times he blasts past me and then gets stuck either slower lane. Traffic is not moving slowly at all. He is just a super shat. Finally, last exit before toll, he is a good 5 cars behind me. We are both in the left lane. He tries to get into the right lane that is emptying due to the exit. Almost clips someone trying to change lanes to exit. I'm the only other car in our pack that did not exit. He flies past me on the right and changes quickly to the left, overcorrects and starts to lose control. The only reason he did not cause a huge accident is the increased tolls on the weekends. I'm the only other car in range. He went back and forth across the highway 3 times before spinning his truck around and rolling backwards off the left side. How his shitty truck managed not to roll is a testament to that manufacturer. I don't remember. I pull over to the left and start to get out. My wife thinks I'm going to accost him in some way. I simply walk to his passenger window to see that he is actually okay. He is sobbing, gripping the wheel, and crying like a toddler. He waves me off. I'll let him know his front end is still close to the road and that's not safe. He lets the truck roll back. I head out point TLDR as whole driver loses control and cries like a beach. One night I was on a single lane ramp from one highway to another and some douchebag in a lifted bro truck has decided that I'm not going fast enough for him, even though I'm doing close to 60 miles per hour on this ramp. It wasn't that tight of a curve. He's tailgating me inches from my rear bumper and flashing his high beams, then gets fed up and passes me on the shoulder. Mind you, this is not a long ramp. It's going from eastbound to southbound, so it's essentially the equivalent of a right turn. The shortest a ramp could possibly be. This was also around the 2012 election and I'm sure my Obama bumper sticker enraged him even further. Well, remember when I said it was night? It's hard to see what's behind you when it's dark, especially when your truck is lifted several feet off the ground, so this douchebag did not see the police car in his rearview mirror. After the ramp merges into the other highway and it's safe to pass, the cop flies past me with his lights on and chases after the guy. He did pull over. I drove past them a minute later, but I hope he got a very expensive ticket. I witnessed a double karma just the other day. Point stuck in traffic. Literally stuck. Everyone probably going 5 miles per hour. Point I'm on the left lane, aka the fast lane, because my turn is coming up. Justin Bieber wannabe in his dad's Corvette behind me revving his engine and honking. I'm there thinking, motherfucker, can't you see the car in front of me is not moving? Nor are the 100 cars in front of him? Still he keeps it at point. After a while he tries to cut into the right lane because it moves a little bit. Promptly blocked by a dude in an Escalade. More revving and honking and tailgating me. I'm about to step down and give little Justin a piece of my mind when he decides to pull over into the emergency lane to get ahead, right in front of a speeding police cruiser who ends up rear-ending him. Point I let out my best Nelson style haha. As I drove past point fast forwards a couple of minutes, I see in my rearview mirror a guy in a sport bike filtering in and out to get ahead, blasting his horn whenever a vehicle tries to merge in front of him, or when he doesn't have enough space to filter through. Filtering is illegal here. Bike guy decides to speed up just as a car merges lanes. Bike guy realizes his douchebaggery can't save him from his stupidity. Bike guy hits the brakes. Bike guy kisses the car's rear windshield and falls down. Point again I do my best haha as I drive past. Back when I was in the military, we'd have to run track each morning. Point now, I've always been a solid, easy pace kind of runner, before this whole jogging fad came about. Point anyway, there was this little scrawny piece of a turd, a real whiner who came in the first day of basic with a dirt stain, start of a goatee, and insisted on wearing a fedora until our petty officer made him take it off. I wish I was kidding here. Who I would lap consistently. Just kept my easy going, one foot in front of the other, method strong, and I'd run circles around this wimp. Point well, one day this sweat stain of a human being must vate his big boy wheaters cause he was running faster than Forrest Gump on a meth bender. I could feel him coming for me, slamming his shoes into the earth. That focused T-1000 stare barreling down, burning holes into the back of my skull. My blood was pumping hard, and I turned up my speed, but it was no use. This motherfucker had an agenda, and it was to fuck my sheet up. Point first he was 20 feet, then 10. His feet pounding the track like Mandingo, after snorting a bulk order of Silas 5 feet 3 feet. I could feel his breath scorching the back of my neck. Point he passed me, eyes redder than the devil's dick, locking with mine, staring into my goddamn soul. With a spittle-slicked grin stretched from ear to ear, those horrible teeth champing exhausted air in and out, he wheezed his horrible victory at me. Gotcha, beach. He screamed. Point, and in his post-orgasmic throes of victory, his foot went directly into a divot in the track. I heard the snapping of tendons and the agonizing squeal of shooting pain as he felt the cruel hand of karma fist fuck him in the ears. I never knew what happened to that little scrawny punk, but I'm sure I'd be able to lap his ass anytime, anywhere. I had a coworker who was not very fond of me. We started off as great friends, but he got a bit butthurt when upper level management stated openly complimenting my hard work and noting my potential for success. Fast forward a couple years later, and this guy gets promoted to manager. He was about 3 years my senior at the time, so it was expected. As soon as he got a hold of that management position though, it was like a target was put on my head. He was not only verbally/mentally abusive, but there were even times that he was physically abusive as well. I tried going to higher management, chain of command, and eventually ours. Nothing ever happened. It became a miserable place to work. Unfortunately, it paid so generously that I didn't have many options unless I wanted to take a huge pay cut. Eventually it comes time for layoffs, and he has to get rid of someone from his team. Guess who gets cut? Yup, me. Vertical bar seems like a bad thing, right? But lo and behold, everything has gone amazingly since then. I reapplied to medical school and was accepted, and I received a job offering to pay me double what I was making before. So karma works in both ways, I suppose. Late to the game, but here it goes. I used to have a mini pepper spray keychain. It is nice, small, and discreet. One night, I was at my then boyfriend's house. We watched a movie and fell asleep. His sister then came into our room in the middle of the night demanding our quilt blanket that we were using because she's cold. Brother and sister fought about it for a bit until I told her I have seen a spare one in the wardrobe. She whipped her phone out to use it as a flashlight, found it, then left. After a while, she returned and complained that it doesn't work, and insisted to have our quilt. Brother and sister fought again, and she eventually left. Later in the night, I could hear her take a shower. I thought that was weird, because it was like 3 AM by then, but whatever. The next morning, the boyfriend went to work. I had uni at night, so I could afford a sleep in. I went downstairs to find the mum and the sister waiting for me. The mum held up my keys and asked if they were mine. Turns out the sister accidentally sprayed herself. It wasn't a direct hit, but it was enough to cause her difficulty breathing and had to take a shower. Her explanation was that she was looking for her phone in her coat to use as a torch to go to the bathroom and mistakenly went through my coat instead. She found the keys and assumed the little pepper spray capsule was a torch. I apologized for bringing something dangerous into their home because the mum was unhappy about it. But when I really thought about it, something didn't add up. She said she was looking for her phone, but she already had her phone with her before she had her shower, which occurred immediately after the spraying. Also, the spray has a cap on it. What kind of torch did she think would have a cap on it? Conclusion: she was going through my sheet. Not only did she woke us up on multiple occasions demanding something she had no claim on, she was invading my privacy and potentially trying to steal sheet. And as a result, she got karma all over her face in the form of a peppery mist. I work for the service desk at the Home Depot. I had a customer a few weeks ago come up to the desk with his wife cussing out a cashier because their Home Depot card wasn't working and the cashier was a faking idiot and all this nonsense. So I get his card and call credit services. My manager is standing in a corner behind the desk keeping an eye on things and is ready to jump in if necessary. Meanwhile, another customer at the desk tells infuriated guy to chill out and quit cursing around the ladies as it's disrespectful and rude. Infuriated guy just gets more pissed. The wife jumps in and now it's just a fiasco. I'm starting to get nervous that a fist fight is going to break out. I finally get through to credit services and they tell me that his card is being declined because he didn't have enough available credit left on his card. I had to stifle my laughter, didn't bother hiding the grin before I handed the phone to the customer. No apology from the customer, and I'm sure there were no apologies to the poor cashier to had to deal with him. Absolutely best case of karma I've ever witnessed. I had an analytical chemistry job right out of college. What they call cookbook chemistry, running tests on environmental samples. I had a supervisor who was universally despised for her condescension and backstabbing ways. We'll call her Yvette. One day, I noticed Yvette setting up a long-running extraction on soil samples. She meant for it to run over the weekend. Just to give you some background, this extraction process used a constant flow of cool tap water To cool a piece of glassware called a reflux condenser, I noticed Yvette setting up the equipment with a condenser and tubing that had given me trouble a couple times in the past. I walked up and suggested that she use another setup because the one she was using had a tendency to lose its tubing connection and let water spill from the running tap supply. Remember this part. It will be important later anyway. After I told her of my problems, she turned to me and said, "Tommy's muffins, that is because you are an amateur. I'm a professional." I was a little hurt, but shrugged, finished my work, and went home. I completely forgot about the whole thing by Monday morning point. When I got in early Monday, Yvette was already there frantically trying to clean up an enormous mess. The entire lab floor was 2 inches deep in water, and because it was epoxy coated concrete, the water wasn't going anywhere without help. She looked up at me with a combination of embarrassment and seething hatred. My only regret is that I let the whole thing go without twisting the knife a bit. Point Beach angered the gods. I worked at a bookstore and opened the store one morning. For some reason I couldn't get one of the 2 double doors to unlock, so I left it for a moment and planned to unlock it later. I forgot. Fast forward a few hours. There's someone in our store who just hid something in his jacket, and the undercover store security tries to confront the thief. The thief decides to bolt for the doors, and the security guy chases after him. From where I was standing, I could see the whole thing, and it was like it unfolded in slow motion. The thief ran straight at the locked door with his arms out to push it, and slammed into it. His arms buckled between him and the door, and his face gave an audible thunk when it hit the wood. As if that wasn't bad enough, the 250+ pound security guard is going too fast to slow his bulk and collides right into the back of the thief, smashing the guy's face into the door again. Blood from the guy's nose everywhere. We called the cops and an ambulance. Wouldn't be surprised if the thief had a broken nose and a concussion. More tales from Buggy 111's Russian summer camp. Huzzah! Each day at the camp was thematic. This day was Game of Thrones. 5 goatee armies battled it out with each other, trying to kill opponents by tearing strips of paper, lives off their shoulder. We were playing for some reason on a heavily sloped field, and one kid, a Chechen my age under the nickname of Fet, ran into another kid named Karagor, much smaller, 13 years old. Fet inadvertently executed a NFL caliber hit on Karagor while both were running down the hill, unaware of each other. Fet, being the kid he is, immediately stops, helps get Karagor up, and starts walking him over to get medical attention. A small crowd gathers to watch. Now, the game still hasn't stopped. People can kill each other, but no one does it in the crowd because they don't want to cause a stampede. Up runs another kid, a Georgian named Doc, pushes through the crowd and kills Fet and Karagor, the only 2 who were out of the game temporarily. A stampede starts. Well, is 25 people a stampede? And Doc bolts out, killing a few more as he goes. A couple of boys Doc's size bolt out after him, wanting to kill him. Doc, being the cocky asshole he is, turns around and starts taunting them as he runs full speed into a wooden platform overlooking the lake we were playing nearby. Doc collapses like a house of cards, and suddenly medical attention is turned on him. No one killed him, and the platform didn't really do much damage, but karma was sure dealt. Late to the party, but a lady in the office I worked in is notorious for stirring the pot and setting people against each other / generally making the workplace toxic. She didn't like someone, targeted her and made her life a living hell. Everyone was aware of what was going on, but couldn't do anything about it because the supervisor is also a manipulative cunt and was in on it. Owners are generally approachable, but all disciplinary / conflict resolution pushes down to lower management as a default. They don't have time for that shit, typically. The target walked out one day. Owner stops her in the hall as she was a valuable employee, trying to find out what's going on. He wanted to make it right. The target said it was too late, and exactly why. One person walked out that day. 2 more were fired on the spot. The 2 that were fired basically got the "don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out" treatment from everyone. And our office is still grossly understaffed 2 years later. I had just got out of a relationship with this really awful guy. I was 17, really weird slash socially awkward, and he was the boy I lost my virginity to, so of course I thought he was the bee's knees. Even when he was cheating on me. I went to a party one of our mutual friends was throwing, and I was one of the first to arrive. Around 30 minutes later my ex arrives, and who does he bring with him? The girl he had cheated on me with. He didn't like her, he was just doing it to be a dick and thought it was funny. Naturally I was upset and wanted to leave as soon as I saw this girl, but I tried to act cool and as though I wasn't bothered. She spent the whole time making beachy comments to me. My friend's stepdad, whose house we were in, decides to come downstairs to see how the party is going before him and my friend's mum leave for their dinner reservation. Immediately this girl walks up to my friend's stepdad, goes in to shake his hand, and says, "Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the girl he cheated on her with," gesturing at my ex and I. What the fuck? My friend's stepdad takes one look at me and sees how awkward slash embarrassed I'm feeling at this point, steps over to my ex and grabs him by the nose. "Oh hey, funny guy. I remember you. So, you think it's funny to bring this bimbo to a party you know rebel_nature is at? You think you're a big man trying to upset a girl, huh? Boasting about cheating is cool, is it?" All while waggling my ex's nose in his grip. He then jerks his nose violently as he releases him, wishes us all a good night, and tells us to behave, before walking back upstairs to leave. I look over at my ex and blood is pouring out of his nose and he's crying. Heh. 7 years married, watched my wife's friendship with her tattoo guy blossoming into something borderline suspicious, but since he was with his girlfriend for years, and they had kids together, I'll let it slide. Came home one day from work, and there's no wife to be found. Cleared out all her shit and anything she deemed worth money and left. Shacked up with tattoo guy. Tattoo guy, Dave, had 5 kids from 3 different women, and was living with his last baby mama, when her wife started faking him. Less than a year later, he knocks her up with twins. She gets big, because of the twins. He cheats on her, because he's a dirtbag. She has the twins, he splits. His child support payments are already split 5 ways. Make that 7. Oh, and the business I started while I was married went through the faking roof. I hear she's living in the 909 and wishing she was dead. I hope that happens for her. I didn't know her personally, but there was this girl once, cute enough but kind of a tomboy. Well, she was a pretty gifted athlete. As she got older, it seemed like her name was etched in stone for success. Every athletic endeavor she attempted, she won. She seemed destined for greatness. Well, like many prodigies before her, she eventually began believing what others were saying about her. She's the best ever. No one can beat her. Best female athlete of all time. She could compete with men. She could even beat a few of the male competitors, and so on and so forth. As she became more and more renowned, her humbleness gave way to cockiness. She even began to make some of those aforementioned comments herself. Finally, someone came and made her day. And boy did they ever, and that's the story of how Avril Lavigne gave up her ice hockey career for singing. What did you think I was talking about? My hometown is on a peninsula in a valley with causeways crossing, and has a major US highway that's only 4 lanes. That, I assume, is due to the cost of widening a causeway. I was stuck in traffic due to a paving crew, so everyone is backed up in the right lane with the passing empty until you got to the crew. We all know that asshole that instead of waiting drives to the front and forces their way into traffic, thus causing the people who were respectful not move. I could see in my mirror a small truck coming, and I'm sure he was over the normal 55 speed limit that was now 35 due to the road work. This guy in a tiny car in the line waiting suddenly pulls into the empty lane and purposely blocks the guy in the truck, and the guy has to lock down his brakes and slides for a ways. The truck guy starts yelling and cussing the guy in the small car, and the small car guy yells, without cursing, that he was speeding and needed to wait his turn in line. So the guy straightens out his car and fully blocks the guy in the road. The guy in the truck yells, "I will remember your face, nigger, and me and my friends will deal with your nigger ass." Guy in the car suddenly gets out and was huge, like 6 feet 4 inches and in shape, sprints back to the truck and literally grabbed his hair through his open window and proceeded to hold his hair while beating this guy in the head until he was out cold and bleeding from his nose and mouth, and his face was already swelling. As a note, the car guy did stopping beating him once he saw he was knocked out. The car guy then reached and took his keys and threw them in the lake. The car guy got back in car and as traffic moved up a bit got back in his spot like nothing ever happened and just waited with the traffic until he got past it. People did check the guy to make sure he wasn't dead and called an ambulance. Wow, it's funny how trying to write what happened took way longer than the entire event itself to go down. I did enjoy seeing that guy get beat down. For my first job as a teenager, I worked at a tutoring center. My older sister got me the job. I loved the kids and some of them I worked with for years, watched them grow up, dealt with the loss of my sister together. My boss was an asshole to kids, parents, employees, everyone. Just an evil woman. Also hyper-conservative, anti-abortion, homophobic, racist, ultra-Christian, etc. I think she fired me because a student found out I was in a same-gender relationship. I had a heart drawn on my hand with my girlfriend of the time's initials in it, and a student asked me about it. Being extremely naive, I thought if it had always been okay for my sister to talk about her boyfriend, it should be okay for me to answer her question as well. I said it was the initials of my girlfriend. She asked me a few simple questions, like how old is she, where is she from, etc. I'm guessing that probably the student told her parents and the parents called and complained or something, because very soon after I was quickly and mysteriously fired. My boss called me while I was at school to tell me I was being let go. Tomorrow would be my last day, with some kind of shaky reasoning about the staff to student ratio being too high. It definitely was not. We only had like 4 employees and we were gaining students at the time. If this was true, she would have fired me when we had less students. On my last day I came in, she was absolutely awful to me for no apparent reason and tried to make sure I couldn't talk to the kids. I was trying to tell them goodbye because I had known some of these kids for years, but she would tell me off every time and eventually moved me to the corner facing the wall to grade papers just so I couldn't talk to them. Soon after I left, her franchise went out of business. It still gives me that feeling of schadenfreude, imagining what a mess it must have been with so few employees after I left that she lost her business and it was her own damn fault. So I used to work at this restaurant and did to-go orders. These girls called ahead and ordered 15 to 30 wings, 5 to 10 for each of them, and they wanted them extra crispy and wet. I told them it would be ready in about 20 to 25 minutes. They took their sweet time getting there, and when they did, they had an attitude just from walking through the door, which wasn't surprising, because I could hear the same attitude as they ordered in their call. I bring them their order, and they check it, and, of course, they aren't crispy and not wet enough. Sure, they may have needed to be respun, but they were definitely cooked crispy until they waited forever to get there, and the sauce softened them. So they want completely new wings, about another 20 minutes. When done they complained they needed to be wetter. So, as they're leaving, one of the girls say, "Oh my god, is that your car?" They had parked in the lot right next to ours and had been towed. Had they not been so rude and timely, karma wouldn't have been such a beach to them. TLDRR. Beaches complained about wings being not crispy or wet enough, were late and waited for new wings, so it was just enough time for their car to get towed in the lot next door to ours. I went to school in a very cold part of the country with a very old heating system. There was an asshole who would piss inside the radiator in the dead of winter, filling the entire building with a pungent cloud of nastiness that would last for days. During his 4th attempt at his dastardly deed, he was caught with his pants down by an older female teacher. Immediately she starts shrieking like a stuck pig, which prompted the entire school and staff to rush into the central hallway to see what was up. Wouldn't you know that within seconds over 300 students and staff are confronted with the sight of a granny teacher dragging the culprit down the hallway by his hair, with him crying uncontrollably and tripping every other step because his pants and underwear were down to his ankles. Prior to this beautiful moment, the anonymous offender had been dubbed the shadow pisser. After this incident we just called him Stubby. One day at work, my partner and I were in heavy traffic. 3 lanes merging into one point. We were being polite, waiting our turn, when a lady in a Mercedes-Benz Cliché, tried to force her way between us and the car ahead as we entered the single lane. We take our turn as she honks her horn and kept jerking her car into a near collision, just being very aggressive. We reach a turn where the lanes open up again when I get a phone call from our office. Apparently the lady called the number on our vehicle and accused us of causing an accident and cursing her out. I lean over and spot her still on her phone yelling. Tell my partner to just drive carefully as I communicate with the office. We were stopped at a red light. I tell them I can see her on the phone, which they confirm on their end. Then at that moment she just accused us of flipping her off. All untrue, of course. That's when the cops came around the corner and approached her. She rolls down her window and starts ranting about us. The police then inform her that they had been watching us and not only clearly saw her talking on her phone while driving, but that none of what she said was true. I immediately tell the office what's happening and we all have a hearty laugh as she is ordered to pull over and then ticketed. TLDR, lady lies about us driving badly, gets caught by the cops talking on her phone while driving. My ex-wife being handcuffed and put into a squad car after she left my 10-year-old son alone in the house to go get drunk. It's a long story and in my post history, but I'll summarize. Ex was mentally ill and an alcoholic, but always insisted I was the real problem or that her actions were my fault. After she butt dialed me late one night, I realized she was blotto in a bar on a night she had my son while my son was sleeping. When I met her at her door with the cops, she was so drunk she couldn't get her key in the door. After years of struggle and putting up with her endless lies and bullshit, I knew that I had finally won and that my son would be living with me. While she was in jail, I wrote the prosecutor of her case a fairly long and impassioned letter about all she had done to me and to my son. I asked him to prosecute to the fullest extent possible to give my son a chance at a normal life. Her life since then has been a shit show. My son and I are doing well. This happened last night. I went to a party with two other friends of mine, and one of them, we'll call him Andrew, drank a little bit too much. We were out in the backyard, having a smoke when Andrew spots a pesticide container almost identical to this. For some stupid reason Andrew thinks it would be funny to pick up the hose and start spraying it at my other buddy, who we'll call Ethan. Some of the chemical gets all over Ethan's pants and left bright white spots all over his pants. Ethan sees this and freaks out, causing Andrew to laugh, and as he's laughing he brings up the hose in an upwards direction and some of the chemicals came out and sprayed him directly in the eye. Everything from that point happened in slow motion. Andrew screams and drops the hose, runs into the house looking to wash his eye out. Ethan was already super mad about Andrew bleaching his pants and started laughing while I ran inside to see if I needed to call 911. Thankfully it wasn't as bad as I thought and there was minor redness in his eye and his vision came back to him within 5 minutes. That was definitely the craziest display of instant karma I've ever witnessed in person. Maybe not the best, but most recent and a good one. Girl in my family invites everyone to her baby shower in the family. The list of what to bring is fucking huge. It basically demands you bring at least one item, most of which are really expensive. It actually said bring something or don't show up. Only 6 people ended up showing up and she ends up posting to Facebook sheet about how upset she is and this just proves no one should ever see my kids and my family hates me. Here's the skinny of it. She put the notices out 48 hours before the baby shower. No one in my family has actually heard from her in over 3 months. She didn't even invite anyone in our family to her wedding, but her husband's family was there. Most of the people either couldn't afford anything on the list or couldn't attend because they lived far away. Well, get to her Facebook page. It's all her friends being angry and saying why didn't you invite me? The answer being that she didn't want to look bad demanding really expensive shit and her family members calling her out on her bullshit. A few of which flat out said, when I invited you to my wedding / reception / baby shower / the birth of my child / other important shit / holidays. Where the fuck were you? Why hasn't anyone heard from you in 3 to 4 mo or greater when you live within 20 minutes of everyone? Someone who was my BFF for a long time, well over a decade, went crazy and gave me a lot of shit at a time when I was trying to rebuild my life after I'd tried to commit suicide. Every day was hard at that time, so obviously didn't need horrible texts every day from someone I trusted. But the icing on the cake was nearly a year later I miscarried just before 3 months was up. This was my first pregnancy after 10 years of struggling with COS and being told point blank I would never fall pregnant. This baby was wanted not only by me, but also my partner, mum, sister. I also almost hemorrhaged to death. It was a really mentally and physically trying time for me, and I was trying hard to focus on looking forward and not going down that dark path I'd been on a year before. So after the miscarriage my so-called friend decided to drunkenly slag me off to various people at 10 AM over a few glasses of wine. One of the people let me know, a good friend and incidentally was working in the emergency Genodept when I was being scanned ECT point. Now he's cleaned himself up and trying to rebuild our ruined friendship. But he's just been told he's gonna be homeless. Karma is a beach. December 26th, 2014. I scored tickets to the Motor City Bowl, or whatever they call it now, in Detroit, and there was a pretty good snowstorm going that whole day. I was headed back from the game traveling on I-75 in a 4x4 and doing like 70 or 75 miles per hour, which even in a snowstorm is slow for me drivers. This guy in a BMW goes flying past me at a good clip in the left lane and sends snow, salt, and ice flying at me from his rear-wheel drive car. I naturally curse at him for being a jackass and just go on about my business. That is when I pass the next exit ramp and I see the same guy about halfway up the incline in the ramp, and his wheels are just spinning like crazy because his rear wheel drive car couldn't find the proper traction to get him up the incline. I proceeded to laugh and cruise on home. Serves you right, guy in BMW. TLDR went around me like jackass in snowstorm. Rear wheel drive car couldn't get him off the next exit ramp. In middle school there was this girl who loved to torment me, along with her friend group. During recess one day, I was really enjoying myself on the swings when she and her friends come up to me and try to basically intimidate me to get off the swing so that they could all take over. They start out by just calling me names and talking shit to get me to get off. I ignore them and keep swinging higher and higher. Seeing that verbal abuse wasn't working, the lead girl decides to start trying to grab the swing chains to try to stop me or knock me out, but since I was too high for her to reach, she resorted to throwing mulch and dirt at me from behind. At one point she reaches down to get a pile of mulch just as I'm swinging backward and my feet knock her backward square in the face. She isn't hurt, but she starts crying and carrying on. When she goes to tell on me, the teacher straight up just says to her, "I saw what was going on the whole time. I didn't get in trouble, and I got to keep my swing in peace for the remainder of recess." As posted my comment from another Ask Reddit thread. Worked at a bar/restaurant by a mall. Older white lady and her 6-foot+ black transvestite friend come in and order several rounds of Patron. In between shots they make several trips to the bathroom and become louder and more obnoxious after each trip. They call the other bartender a dirty spick and tell him to go back to Mexico right before they try and walk out on a $50 check. I chased them out into the parking lot, and after much cursing and name calling and a threat to call the cops, they finally returned to pay the bill. The older white lady slams $100 down on the counter saying, "You can choke on that, you dirty Mexican. I'm white." Not that it really mattered in this case. She then started cussing out anybody within a 10 radius, so we called mall security. The guy who showed up was big. Like 6 feet 7 inches 300+ lbs big. Of course the lady and her friend start cursing at him, calling him a loser, saying he was too fat to be a cop. What's the matter, couldn't he pass the cop test, etc. The guy takes it all in stride and escorts them out of the restaurant. He comes back later to tell us that after they left he called his dad, who was a cop patrolling the area, and told them about the lovely couple's antics. The guy's dad pulled them over and surprise found copious amounts of cocaine on them. Enough to add a drug charge on top of the DUI they got after she, the older lady, was driving, I guess, blow over the legal limit. TLDR, older white lady and black transvestite come into bar, cause obnoxious spectacle by cussing out everyone. They proceed to go out in a comic blaze of glory by getting pulled over by the police officer, dad of the mall security guy they insulted, and promptly go to jail. Walking home going school one day and a guy who was a few years younger was being verbally abusive to some kid who was walking home on his own, so myself and the two guys I was walking back with caught up and pretended to be friends with the kid. Pretty sure our acting was terrible, but the bully kept being abusive, so we decided to scare him a little and all run at him to get him to fuck off and leave all of us alone. We hadn't even moved 5 meters and the guy was trying to leg it, but he instantly slipped on the muddy grass and got up sheepishly, kept his mouth shut, and walked off. We walked with the kid who was being bullied for a bit and told him that if he gets in trouble with the guy again, to find one of us and walk with us, or if he wanted we'd happily back him up if he wanted to get the school to sort it out. The guy never picked on the kid for the remainder of time. Myself and my friends were at the school. 100 years ago I moved to Australia. I was a London club kid and I looked crazy. Blitz kids, all that. I looked crazy good and honestly had no clue how to look differently. First day on Avalon Beach, I'm plastered in makeup, bright red lipstick, giant black couture straw hat. Stephen Jones, the very famous English milliner, had given it to me. I was wearing a vintage, psychedelic pattern bunny costume and had a towel and a book. This guy comes over, introduces himself as Yuka, which was some kind of surfer handle. He berated me utterly. People like me don't like people like you. You're a faking weirdo. Girls here have normal hair, mine was almost litterbox red, and no makeup, and normal bikinis. You don't belong here. He was such a dick. I said nothing. Just before he lit into me, he mentioned that his Viwanid sunglasses were brand new, anti-glare, state-of-the-art etc. When he had finished his nasty speech, he plunged into the surf and lost his glasses instantly. I smiled. Still gives me immense pleasure to think about it. So I had a faking crazy / evil boyfriend in high school. He was my first boyfriend and was really normal for the first 6 months and then went faking insane. He did a bunch of drugs, stole my weed from me one time, cheated on me, asked this 14-year-old girl for nudes while we were dating, etc. I finally dumped him when we got in a fight one time and he threw my phone on the floor and physically restrained me from leaving my room, then held a pair of scissors to his throat and threatened to kill himself. My little brother called the cops and he got taken to a psychiatric ward. I dumped his ass and didn't hear anything about him for 2 years. I ran into his best friend and we caught up and I asked how my ex was. He was like, fuck that guy, he's a lying piece of shit. I don't know exactly what happened to him, but I heard he got committed to a mental hospital and escaped and ran around downtown in a hospital gown until police got him. I was laughing my ass off because he totally deserves it. Since his house was in my neighborhood, I got curious and drove by it on the way home. None of their cars were there and I suspect his whole family moved. Lol. So another year goes by and I see one of my Facebook friends shared a GoFundMe page with his name. I look at it and see my ex is trying to raise $12,000 for ministry training because he's currently in a sobriety camp training to become a minister. He's faking evil and insane and thinks he's qualified to give advice to people. Here's a quote from the GoFundMe. The day I dumped my meds down the drain was the day I realized that Jesus didn't just deliver me from addiction, but he had totally transformed me into a new person. I want to see people pulled out of darkness and into the light of Christ, to point and guide broken and hurting people to the only source of true freedom, the cross. Anyways, I felt compelled to donate $5, the minimum amount, so I could leave a comment, which read, "Wow, the power of the Lord is amazing. Only a few years ago you held me hostage with a pair of scissors. God bless." I worked at a family-owned business. After being there about 6 months, their shop manager and I started dating. We weren't open about it and kept it to ourselves and out of the workplace. The best friend of the boss wife who also worked there saw us out together and caused a shitstorm for me at work. The owner, his wife and the best friend all became openly hostile to me since I was the outsider, and ultimately I left because of it. 3 months after I left, the boss wife found out her husband and her bestie were doing the bump uglies and the bestie was pregnant. Wife gets escorted out of the company. Bestie has the baby. Bad hubby loses interest in both and the bestie loses her job. 2. It's been 12 years, and for the past 10 I've been happily married to the shop manager. All other parties are still bitter and fighting each other, and the old bossman slash hubby slash cheater is now dating the secretary that was the receptionist when all the hell started breaking loose after his first affair. His karma is he lost all his money to the 2 jilted women in alimony and child support. Went to a comedy club on my 19th birthday. There were 2 comedians and a host. One of the comedians was a newbie, probably his first time doing stand-up, but the host and headliner were relatively known in the area. Anyways, there's one guy in the audience who clearly had too much to drink. He heckled everyone. The host played along a bit and made fun of the guy. The newbie couldn't handle it. His whole set was basically ruined. The headliner was fed up and told the staff at the club to escort him out. The heckler refused to move, so they just stopped serving him drinks, but the guy continued to heckle the headliner. The comedian was getting visibly angry that the staff wasn't doing anything about the guy. Eventually the staff tried to get him to leave. They tried for about 5 minutes. The heckler basically said, "I paid to get into this show. Unless you're a cop, I ain't leaving." All of a sudden, this surly guy in the audience gets up, goes to the heckler, throws him to the ground, takes out a badge, and says, "I'm a cop." He escorted the heckler out and got a standing ovation when he returned. Several years ago, I was on leave and having lunch with friends. They all ordered beers with our pizza. I'm not a big drinker and DUIs are no joke. Lost my mom to a drunk driver when I was a kid. When the buddy who was driving started drinking, I let him know I'd be happy to drive his car. "No way, man," he said. "I'm a good drunk driver." He laughed. I didn't. "We will fight about it when you're drunk," I said. A few moments later, he slid me his keys. Fast forward an hour or so, we are driving along, headed back to the house. There's a truck in the turn lane ahead of us, waiting to turn into a gas station. They have to cross my lane to do so. The truck has all the time in the world to make it, but is waiting. I remember thinking, he's going to hit me right before he accelerated into the driver's side door. This guy had a good 15 to 20 seconds and waits until our paths cross to accelerate. Anyhow, my head bounced off the window and door jamb. My buddies are all yelling. I'm quite calm, probably from the blow. They're yelling at me. I'm like, "Did you see that?" And thinking, damn, this is going to be a mess. Then, I see red and blue lights. The other driver jumps out of his truck and runs up to my door. Somehow, they've gotten my door open. The driver says, "Man, I didn't see you." The cop who had been following me, and of whom I was unaware, is suddenly by the door too, and says, "That's okay, I saw it all." My buddy who owns the car is pissed, slamming his hands down on the roof and yelling, "I just paid this off." Then goes silent and still looks at me and says, "Thank you. I'd have been faked if I was driving." Then proceeds to commence pounding again. They still owe me for the cab fare. Truck mailed the car at an angle that sheared the driver's side wheel off. 2. Edit a couple of words. In grade 5 to 6 we had this super douche sexist sub. I don't know if he hated fits or what, but no one liked him. He would make us do suicide lines and time them, boys and girls. Girls always won. After the first couple times we heard him, we knew something was up. Eventually we had enough of the faker. We hatched a plan that girls would all walk super slow, guys would all sprint. He still says girls win. He told guys to start running laps, but we all ignored him. He started getting angry. We even told teachers about him treating us like this, and they just got mad at us for complaining. At one point they gave me and 3 of my friends detentions for a week after going to the principal. One time we did the plan again and talked to guys after class. Called us all as holes who don't know anything and being morons, etc. One kid starts crying, leaves and goes home. His mom calls the school about it, screaming at them, absolutely furious. Our teacher was gone for a month for surgery, so we were supposed to have him. Next day we found out he was suspended from teaching at our school. Did the whole school a favor as well as future generations. Huge justice boner. Girl I went to high school with was a real piece of work driving home from a party. She crashed her car into a friend of my family. He was on a motorcycle. His pelvis was crushed. He lost both testicles. He lost a few feet of intestine. Just completely messed up. She never even apologized. Nothing happened to her because she was some state level athlete or some crap. I wanted to beat the crap out of her, but it's kind of hard to justify a guy beating on a girl to other people. Even when she ruined someone's life after crashing her car from drunk driving for the second time and acts like nothing happened. I never laid a hand on her, but apparently she had been talking shit to a girl on the soccer team. Well, the day soccer season ended, that girl went up to BGMC drunk driver and smashed her face into a goddamn locker. Repeatedly there was plenty of blood and teeth laying around afterward. The girl needed cosmetic surgery to repair some of the damage. Didn't necessarily ruin her life, but I, and several others, felt a lot better seeing her get taken down a notch. No idea what happened to her soccer team. Girl is doing great though, and the family friend is doing pretty darn good to all things considered. My mother got the house in the divorce, with the only stipulation being that she make her payments on time, or house ownership would transfer to my father. Cue up 17 years of him trying to force my mother into missing payments. He let our court-mandated health insurance coverage lapse so that she'd be slammed with medical bills, failed to pay child support, and dragged her into court every few months with complaints about how she maintained the house. He lawyered so aggressively the judge wrote in the final court documents that my mother was in the right. The divorce awarded her the property, but that my mother was to give my father the value of the house at the time of the divorce, essentially in exchange for never having to see another petition from him ever again. About a year or two later, my sister was looking for her own financial records in a public database, seeing if a document had posted, and guess what came up? His very recent bankruptcy proceedings. He lost everything, including his house. I absolutely hate my sister-in-law. We worked together at a cafe in a shopping center. That's how I met my fiance. I used to go to the hairdressers across the cafe to get my hair done. Blonde foils. She has never colored or cut her hair, always in a long plait. She used to go to the hairdressers to deliver their coffees and tell them to burn my hair and try to ruin it and say it was an accident. They used to tell me when I went there, and we would all laugh about it and talk about how crazy she is and feel sorry for me if my relationship ever lasted. Her and her husband were going overseas to visit her parents in Eastern Europe, and she decided she's going to get foils too. She went to the same hairdressers and they put the foils on her hair. Having virgin hair, she had never come in contact with hair dye, and she had a massive reaction to the dye and was rushed to the hospital because her face was swollen and burning up. My fiance told me all about it, and it never fails to make me smile. Every time someone mentions karma, I tell my experience with it. A friend of mine, who we'll call Anna, had troubles recently with an old roommate, who we'll call Miranda. I had a feeling this would happen because Miranda had been slowly kicking out all of her other roommates. I have no idea why. It used to be 7 people living there and is now down to 3. So Anna gave Miranda her 2 months notice because things were getting bad and she clearly didn't want her around anymore. Literally like 3 days later, she told Anna she had 1 month to move out. A couple days later, she told her she had 1 week. So she was out of there first thing in the morning because she was done dealing with that. The very next faking day, she gets a call from Miranda saying that her other 2 roommates lost their jobs, so she was only the one bringing money into the house, and was basically asking her to move back in. And she noped out of that with a side of "fuck you. Karma is a beach." It was during October about 10 years ago. My friends and I were doing one of those driving scavenger hunts that is supposed to eventually lead you to a haunted house/forest. There were 6 of us in this little sedan, 3 in the front, 3 in the back. As we were nearing the haunted forest attraction, we came up to a red light. A huge truck pulled up behind us, headlights pouring through the back window, blinding the driver and scaring the hell out of all of us. He inched so close to our car that I swear our bumpers had to be touching. The light was still red, so we inched up a little bit to try and put some space between us, but he inched right up with us. He started to flash his bright cities, revving his engine to intimidate us. We couldn't figure out why he was doing this. Maybe because we were a car full of girls? Maybe because of the sports stickers on the back of the car? Whatever the reason, the people in the back seat were trying to shield the light from coming in the window and blinding the driver. When the light turned green, the driver in our car went through the light cautiously, afraid to provoke the guy behind us for any little reason. We heard him hit his gas wheels screaming, and we were terrified that he was about to ram us. Instead, he whipped into the oncoming traffic lane on our left side. His passenger pitched a full to-go cup of soda out his window, which exploded onto our vehicle's front windshield. We were stunned as a huge truck started to race away, and then, sirens coming from our right side, a police car comes zooming around us and pulls the guy over. As I recall, everyone in the car said something like this: "Oh." Years ago I was driving home on a very busy road when some kid who'd been weaving in and out of traffic started tailgating me. This is one of those little economy cars with insanely bright, badly aimed headlights, a poorly installed body kit, and a muffler that sounded like a weed eater. That's when the car in front of me switched lanes suddenly to avoid a square bale of hay. I didn't have anywhere to go, and hitting the brakes was only going to end with Mr. Fast and Furious Jr. stuck under my rear bumper. Since I was driving a hulking old work truck with more miles on it than the space shuttle, I figured hitting the hay bale was the best option. It wasn't like it was going to make my truck look worse. The front bumper must have cleared the bale, because I heard and felt when it hit the crossmember under the engine and various other things under the truck with no real damage. Though the kid wasn't so fortunate. He had no idea what was coming and no room to react. I heard a whump, crack behind me, followed immediately by the receding sounds of a constipated weed eater. To my immense satisfaction, when he passed me later, a big chunk of body kit was missing. I produce underground parties in New York City. I was about to sign a contract to rent a giant space for a party last Memorial Day when a much larger production company stopped me and my crew from procuring the space because they were in talks to get the space themselves for the summer. They told the owners that they were about to rent the place for $150K and we were going to $45K, and that if they didn't cancel our agreement, they wouldn't go forward with this. Now our party is definitely not in competition with this. We are a daytime party with local playing genres spanning house, hip hop, and disco, and tickets that sell for $20. They book headliners for all night affairs, playing deep house and techno, and their tickets sell for $60+. Their events also weren't going to start until mid to late June. Zero competition. So anyway, we get screwed by them because we don't have the money to pay the owners and any lawyers. Fast forward to Halloween a few weeks ago. They are the #1 party in Brooklyn. We are #2, measured by ticket sales and attendees on Resident Advisor. At about 11 PM, just as our party is starting, I receive word that they have been shut down by the city, losing around $300K and damaging their reputation in New York City. I can't say that I didn't feel a bit of schadenfreude. This happened a few weeks ago. I'm a mail carrier, and I was deliver inside some very expensive apartments. As I'm throwing the mail in boxes, I had this lady just walk over my tubs and goes inside the box I'm delivering to right now and went to take the contents. I do not know this woman and no one is to get their mail while I have the mailboxes open, so I told her that she had to wait. There was a package in the box that she wanted, and I told her if she let me see her license to confirm that was indeed her, then she could have it. She flipped. She was screaming and cussing and said I'm taking my mail anyways. She went to grab it. I blocked her, but she ended up grabbing the parcel. I took the parcel out of her hands with a bit of force. She said she was in a hurry, but she took every measure besides just going to get her license. She got the apartment manager, her friend, everything but the license. I don't care who says you are this person. I have to see an identification card. After 20 minutes and calling me a beach several times, she finally went and got her license. After she got her mail, said she was missing mail and I stole it. Why do I want your mail? That's all there is so far. I'm not done putting mail in the boxes. She stormed off because she was waiting for an important check and was leaving for the week on vacation. Was on her way out, needed to make a flight, 2 letters down in my pile was her check that I saw right after she stormed off. I felt no pity. I got her name, unit number and the cameras that watch the mailroom. Got everything of what she did. Assaulting a carrier that's on duty is a federal crime. I may be a young female mail carrier, but I have bigger balls than most males that I work with. Your looks do not persuade me to give you your mail, neither does your title, which you hear a lot of here. Do you know who I am? I'm married to such and such. My old store manager was the worst person to work for. She was condescending, verbally abusive towards everyone, except the sales associate leader who kissed her ass and belittled the shit out of everyone. She also had a super awesome habit for taking credit for everything that was done correctly, then throwing associates under the bus when we slipped up. In other words, she was a monstrous bitch. After maybe 6 months of her tyranny bullshit, a lot of good people started quitting left and right and relocating to another store. It was kind of sad. The assistant manager was by far my favorite person to work for because she was so relaxed, even if you made mistakes, and I made a lot my first week and was really fun to work with. She was there for about 5 years and loved her job, but couldn't stand to work for the manager any longer. One by one everyone with experience, who knew what they were doing, were quitting or relocating to another store. Apparently, the SM had done something similar to different store 45 minutes away from us where she was degrading to the employees and made a bunch of them quit, yet no one lodged a complaint or batted an eye. After a few more months of her shitiness, she suddenly isn't coming into the store as often. A few weeks go by and we finally hear that she's in the hospital with West Nile virus. Faking West Nile virus. She tried working again after being released, but she was too weak and eventually moved to another state and we needed a new SM. Hallelujah. Sweet, sweet justice was served. Edit, Mr. Word. Coming into work one morning I was passed on a residential street by some mad woman driving and SUV. This street allows two-way traffic, with parking on one side. When cars are parked it is very difficult for two cars to transit the street without one stopping and pulling in for the other to pass by. Add to that, this particular street has a nasty sewer grate pothole along the non-parking side. Well, this brainiac decides to floor it and pass me on the left side right near this massive pothole. I slammed on the brakes, put the right side of my car on the curb, and made it onto the highway with no accident or damage, but a lot of rage. I saw the woman a few cars ahead on the highway, so I did my best Senna impression in catching her and getting in front, where I proceeded to drive as slow as possible, pacing the cars on my left and right, while showing this lady the New Jersey state badge the whole way. Then I get to my work exit, she takes the same exit. Okay, very populated area, this isn't abnormal. I approach my office building entrance and put my blinker on. So does she. I pull into my garage, park the car and proceed to my floor. Who do I see sitting in our legal department 10 minutes later as I go to get a drink? You guessed it. This same lady. Fast forward a few weeks and she is fired for arriving at the office late repeatedly. My best Nelson haha followed shortly thereafter. This just happened. I was in my car in heavy, congested downtown traffic, waiting for the light to change. Road is a total of 6 lanes wide. I see a black lady. She is technically jaywalking, but she did it carefully. Opposing traffic was completely clear. She crossed that with no problem. Then, she walked while weaving through our congested 3 lanes. Mind you, the light had just turned red, and we were all just sitting there. When she crossed in front of the Lincoln SUV next to me. The dude honked. It startled me, and I'm sure it shocked her. I thought, now, why the hell would you need to honk at her? When she turned full Martha faking banshee. She started yelling asshole, while she beat his door and windshield with her purse. She spit on his windows. It was awesome. And the guy sat there for at least 30 seconds and had to take it. I felt karma got served so well. I wished I was as awesome as that lady. No reason on earth he had to honk at her. When my wife and I announced we were getting married, her psychotic baby daddy, who hasn't worked in 8 years and has major anger issues, put a PPO against me for his son, claiming I'm violent, aggressive and intimidating towards his son. I'm a retired Marine with some PTSD, but I have a spotless record and a really good job. He tried using my military experience as evidence that I'm violent. Little did he know was that the judge we went before was also a marine in my company. Servpro completely restored his house after it caught fire a few years back. In the cross-examination, when I was able to call my stepson's father up and ask him questions, he began shouting at me, to which I continued my questions. After more shouting and aggressive behavior, he rushed me from the witness stand. The bailiff used his taser on him and he was arrested for contempt and assault. His ordered parenting time was greatly reduced and he was ordered to pay my lawyer fees for his frivolous account. 3 weeks later he killed himself. I was coming onto a highway. It wasn't crowded and the on-ramp merged pretty well with the slow lane. There was this guy in an other way behind me and 2 lanes to the left wide open. He was approaching fast, but I was nearly at the speed limit and so didn't think anything about it other than somebody's in a hurry. He came barreling up on me to the point where I could not see anything but the grill of his 4D something, escalator, emasculated, epilepsy, something, and laid on the horn, swerved around me, and then cut me off. It really pissed me off, seeing as the entire damn highway was nearly empty, a few cars ahead, and a handful behind. The dickhead had cut me off, but I shifted into the center lane, changed gear and started to pull up next to him. I was a bit irate, to say the least, and planned on flipping him off as I passed him. He tried to cut me off again, and it turns out it was lucky for me, I guess, since I was looking at the new Cludrigger with the diesel. Fumes make me horny decal on his back window. Because he hit some chunk of metal in the road and I saw his tire blow out. Point, I would love to say he did the whole action movie rollover, but no, he swerved a lot, and the tire shredded into nothing before he got to the shoulder of the road. Ironically, in his effort to cut me off, he actually saved me and my car from some damage. It kind of made my day. When I was in school, I have no friends. I literally had not one single friend from the age of 5 to 15. I was so lonely. Then I finally met a group of dudes. Brothers even accepted me for being gay. Life was amazing. But years of no social experience means I forgot how to human. I got high from actually having friends. I kind of turned into a crazy person. I needed to hang out with at least one of them, ideally all of them, 7 days a week. I got addicted to being accepted finally. I couldn't see that I was suffocating our friendship. They began to hang out with me less. I needed them back. Being alone hurt. I would like to create pity, so they'd feel bad for me and hang out with me more. That only worked until they saw right through it. Eventually I was blacklisted and none of them wanted to hang out with me ever again. Once again I was alone. TLDR. I was an attention-seeking hoe whose actions made me end up alone. Update. I learned from my mistakes and learned how to be an actual person and now have healthy boundaries with friends since them. Friends who I don't need to talk to daily or weekly or even monthly to know that they like me for me. This one took years, but I think it was worth it. My girlfriend's parents own a clothing store aimed at a niche market for many years. I want to say they opened in the early 80s. It was very successful. So successful, in fact, that another dude came in and bought a shop right across the street from them and sold the same clothes, probably mid-90s. Now, my girlfriend's folks are not rich. They don't mark up their clothes and usually sell them at maybe 5% over cost. Because of this, they had a good following, but the business was entirely word of mouth. This other guy, though, was fairly wealthy already. I think he may have had money from his parents as such. He was able to take a loss on clothes and advertise heavily. He was also able to buy clothes in large quantities. Quantities so large that he got quite chummy with most of the biggest purveyors and convinced, or bribed, or maybe threatened them not to sell to my girlfriend's folks. So for him, business was booming. Girlfriend's folks could no longer stock the clothes the customer wanted, so they flocked to the other shop. He built a huge house on one of the main roads in the city so everyone could see his riches. Yes, he's that kind of asshole. Flash forward about 20 years, and he decides he wants to get out on his own. This is about a year ago now. He buys a plot of land in the most expensive part of town and build a shopping center with his store as the biggest anchor. Really nice place. He went all out because again, he wanted everyone to know that he was rich enough to do this anyway. It turns out that with this market, geography plays a role, and his customers were not willing to drive across town to shop at his store. Well, no matter how rich you are, you can't sustain a business with no customers. Furthermore, as it turns out, he wasn't all that rich and had done most of this on credit. So when this new venture flopped, he was out an untold fortune. Both his locations, new shopping center and old location, went out of business, and he's been forced to sell the land and his house. His wife divorced him because he married the kind of woman who only loved him for his money, and his kids are loyal to their mother. Last I heard he's living in a studio apartment in a shitty part of town. It was -30 below, and after a day of skiing at Mont Tremblant in Quebec, Canada, my car wouldn't start. I don't speak very much French. Both English and French are official languages in Canada, even if French is preferred in some parts. Stranded in the freezing cold in a parking lot that was quickly emptying of people, I couldn't find anyone willing to speak English or help me out. Finally I found a lift operator who I had been speaking English with earlier in the day. At first he also pretended he couldn't understand me until I told him I recognized him, and he magically learned English. He said he didn't have cables, but his house was just 5 minutes away, and if I paid him $50 he'd go get them and jump me. I was super pissed, but out of options I agreed. 45 minutes later he showed up smelling like booze and stumbled out of the car. He jumped me, I paid him, and as he was pulling away he backed his car into one of those solid steel barricades that are used to protect pedestrian walkways. He hit it so hard his rear wheels lifted off the ground. He had to call a tow truck and paid way more than $50 to extricate his car and repair the damage. I had been making an effort to work on my road rage. Florida driver reporting in, and I was driving across a very long bridge, all the way in the left lane going 15 miles per hour over. This lady in a huge black SUV screaming into her not at all hands-free device starts telling me, since I was in the beginning stages of dealing with road rage, I'll let her tail me for a lot longer than I admittedly should have with a loved one in the car. However, I noticed that we were approaching a blind curve and I did not feel at all comfortable driving 20 to 25 miles per hour over the limit. So, finally, for the first time ever, I pulled over into my right lane to let them pass as I moved over and started pressing on my brakes. To get to a comfortable speed I see a wall of brake lights. I still had to slam on my brakes preemptively a bit to stop, so the cars behind me would know to do the same. Unfortunately, the angry SUV lady was still trying to go 20 to 25 over the limit into a wall of stopped cars. From what I saw, from the safety of my car, she ended up having to ram into a wall, holding down her car horn, and flew past at least 5 cars while trying to come to a stop point. I hope she made it out okay. The wall she rammed into was on the driver's side and I imagine she was severely injured at bare minimum. But I have to say, that lady taught me everything I needed to know about the dangers of road rage. I always move into the right lane / pull over to let people pass now. It's not worth it. I promise. In grad school, mid-late 90s, I was one of very few women who road raced motorcycles at a club level. Being one of 3 women in a club of 300 men, we women naturally stood out. For better or for worse. I started on a 600, and since that class was full of lunatics, most of whom could not get off the starting line without wadding into a pile of metal, I moved to a 2-stroke 125, which was far more suited to my small stature of barely 5'3". Now for those who don't know, a 2-stroke 125 has very little torque and its top end speed in a straight line is nothing impressive. However, those little bikes can rail around a corner like a missile. Race weekends were one a month, and the Friday preceding the race weekend allowed for anyone, especially street riders with no race license and without any track experience, to come ride the track. That was usually more dangerous for the licensed racers as those street guys were inexperienced, had huge egos and overall didn't know what the fuck they were doing. On one Friday, I noticed, as usual, a group of guys pitted in the paddock checking me out. Lone female on this tiny bike, a 125 is tiny, I could curl it myself. They snickered and I could overhear their comments of how they were going to smoke me on their big, tough 750s and liter bikes come our practice time point despite my starting the practice from the back with hopes of avoiding them. This group of guys intentionally tried to mess with me. Nothing outright dangerous, but unnecessarily close passing. I had had enough, so I railed around them, safely on the outside, in a nice long turn, with my knee firmly on the ground. And, I waved point. I suppose I shouldn't have done that, as by the time we reached a straight one of the guys used his superior horsepower. I had 37 HP on a good day, he was on a 1000, to blow past me at 160 miles per hour point. He looked over his shoulder and waved. All I could think was, better look where you are going, because this straightaway is gonna turn into turn 1 very soon, and you best get braking. He turned around, saw he completely had blown the very last brake marker, and crashed right in front of me in spectacular fashion. I was able to ride around the mess safely. Point an hour later, after the dust was swept up and the ambulance left, I walked over to him, and his buddies in his pit. He was sitting, wearing a sling, looking quite grumpy. His 1000 was now smushed into a 650. His friends saw me approach and started snickering. I asked, "How you feeling? Will you be okay?" "Yes." He snarled. Me, "What were you thinking? Don't you know you're supposed to look in the direction you are riding, and not over your shoulder at girls you pass who are 100 HP down on you? You big silly," said with a big smile. His friends found the entire thing hilarious. He did not. This upperclassman in my high school was taking a leisurely stroll through the halls. On this lovely stroll of his, he'd jump at the underclassmen in his path, making loud noises to scare them, because none of them were expecting it. He'd do it while their backs were turned, or when he was super close to them. I was quietly watching him do this to 2 or 3 other kids who were further up the hallway from me as I talked with my friend. He reaches the end of the hall and scares one last kid before his beady little eyes focus on me, and my friend Fuckface tries to act like he's not going to target me, but I've seen this before. I've been bullied most of my life in and out of school. He jumps towards me, and I kick this faker right in his dig as that fight or flight response takes over. He drops like a ton of bricks in front of me, gasping and grabbing the locker door to his right point. Oh shit, I just kicked this dude in the dick. I kicked an upperclassman who is popular in my school in his dick, and God has cursed me, because the damn principal is suddenly there in the hallway too. I just know they're going to haul me down to the office and suspend me on my first day of high school. Way to go me, way to go. Living up to the family name of being a troublemaker. She kicked me. Fuckface exclaims in this weak voice that only comes out of a guy after you hit him in the nuts, and the principal looks at him before looking at me. I saw that. You shouldn't have scared her. You got what you deserved. The principal gives this guy a toothy grin before waiting for Fuckface to get to his feet and be farther down the hall. You did a good job. You're not in trouble. He deserved it. I saw him scare 2 other kids. The principal pats me on the shoulder before heading down the hall towards a classroom. When I was in middle school, I babysat for a woman. Nice house. 2 kids. Every day after school. So much weird. There are locks on the fridge. They aren't allowed in their rooms until bedtime. She is cold to them etc. I watched them every day after school until 9 to 10 at night and came to love them like my brothers. I saw locks on the outside of their bedroom doors and begged my parents to take them in. They explained they can't because we are nearly neighbors, but promised to handle it. I think called CPS. Don't know if anything happened. They moved. These 2 boys were so bright and loving and starved for attention and basic kindness it just haunts me. Point kept asking around about them. Later find out she ditched them with her abusive ex and one was dead. Years later learn that her body was found in a vat on a farm. Death by serial killer. I struggle to this day to feel something about her, sad or any empathy, and I think I do feel a little bit, but I also feel that maybe that is just a false emotion, because I really feel nothing. Not happy, not mad, just nothing. My only concern is for the remaining son. I'm late to the party, but here's my story. When I was in elementary school, I used to get into a lot of fights until 5th grade, when I had to be on my best behavior to get into the good middle school I wanted to go to. So one day this kid is trying to fight me all day for no reason other than he wants to be a bully. After school gets out, he follows me through the hall, pushing me and trying to get a response. I told him if he pushed me one more time he would regret it. He pushed me again, and I pushed him against the wall with one hand holding his face against the wall and the other hitting his fave. My teacher comes over, absolutely livid, and pulls me off of him and tells me to go to the office. For some reason I actually went. I sat there for about 5 minutes after I told them what happened, and the receptionist told me they would call me back in on Monday since it was after school on a Friday. Well, I never got called back in and got to go to the school I needed to. I ended up seeing that kid in high school and wondered if he remembered how he got his ass beat for being a bully, and I got away with it. There was this girl I knew in high school, a dancer on the cheer squad, who was just a real cunt towards the fat kids. She was one of the fat PR plat freaks and constantly went on and on unsolicited about how disgusted she was by fat people and would please someone kill her if she ever got over 130 lbs. She would loudly talk shit about them or call them names and try to humiliate them. I'm not even sure she ever pretended to be concerned for their health. She just loved feeling some kind of warped moral superiority over them. A few years later, while I was working a summer job in a cafe, she came in to pick up her lunch order and she had gotten huge, easily over 200 lbs. She made a few seconds of nervous eye contact with me before darting out the door. When she realized that she recognized me from high school. I feel sorry for her, but also I hope she learned her lesson. Probably not though. My dad and stepmother were/are awful at parenting. I've never understood why two people who were visibly uncomfortable around kids of any kind would actually try to sue for more custody. Not once, not twice, but too many times that I've lost count. Anyway, I cut off all contact when I was 15. Wonderful story there, but that's for another time. 2 years later we heard from a cousin that my dad and stepmother had adopted a young girl from a different country. He stopped paying child support to my mom because he had a new family now. We eventually heard that they were having childrearing problems, parenting problems, school and discipline problems, and that they were eagerly looking forward to when she would leave for college. She would be a legacy kid at stepmom's Ivy League school, so they could retire and finally be alone. But within a decade their new daughter had a psychotic break. No medication, group home, hospitalization, in or outpatient therapy helped, which is really awful to think about. The karmic kicker? This sister I've never met will now live with them for the rest of her and their natural life. These parents who never should been parents, who couldn't wait to have her gone and out on her own, are now her permanent caretakers, forever. I feel bad for her, but have no pity for them. This happened to me. It sucked. It was a good day. I was selling my car, getting it washed in a weird part of town. This clean-cut guy came up to me and asked me for some gas money as his van broke down a block from that location. He said he forgot his wallet to buy gas. I said to him, I actually don't carry cash, and he insisted we go to the station across the street to pull cash out. I was in a giving mood, so I walked across the street with him. We walked in, and right away the ATM said out of order. My senses were telling me not to help this man, but I believed him as he kept saying that he isn't sketchy and that he works for group health. Dude, I'll pay you back. We both walked back to my car. Then I finished washing my car as the man lingered, and I started apologizing, saying, sorry man, hope you find some help. The man suggested I drive him to his car. I said sure. We then approached a local credit union, and he then suggested we stop so I could pull some cash out. I was so faking annoyed at this point that I stopped at the bank and pulled out money. I pressed the $20 button, and then he chimes in and said $40 would be generous. I have a diesel van. I pulled $40 out and I dropped him off at a grocery store. I asked, where is your van? He said it was on the other side of the store and that he wanted to go into the store so he could write down his info to give it to me. I didn't have my phone with me. He walked back out of the store, gave me his number, and said to call him in 30 so he could go home, get his wallet, meet me, and so he could pay me back. I called him, no answer. I knew I was faked. A few weeks passed, and it always was a lingering shitty thought, and I was watching the local news. I never watch it, but for some reason I did. They caught a scammer who was pretending to work for group health, and that they arrested him. I was happy. Karma is a beach. My ex is obsessed with the female form, especially Victoria's Secret models. He would sneak his mom's magazines, and he and his dad would swoon over them together. His hard drive was named after his favorite model/actress. If a VS commercial ever came up on TV, they would tell everyone to shut up, so they could watch it in silence. Sometimes they'd even rewind their TiVo to watch the commercial again. The annual fashion show was the worst, though. I wasn't allowed to watch it with him the first year we were together. The second year, I could go, but if I talked, or made noise, or did anything to indicate that I wasn't fully enraptured by their beauty, he and his dad would call me jealous, and make a faking scene, and threaten to never invite me to their fashion show screening again. I broke up with him 2 years ago. I'm in New York right this moment, because the company I work for flew me out to work on the VS fashion show. He's on the other side of the country, leaving passive-aggressive comments on my IG, and trying to find a job after getting recently fired. My ex really faked me up. Without going into too much detail, I now suffer from quite a bit of anxiety, and certain things trigger horrible attacks. Even though it's been almost 6 years, she broke up with me by telling me it was because she wanted to sleep with this guy who was in the other room with his girlfriend, as well as the fact that I didn't work hard enough. Even though I was the only one with a job, she gets $10,000 a year from the state because of a lawsuit. Not to mention I was working constantly and a full-time student, seeing a clear way, or if the cycle of abuse, I got the fuck out, but not without telling the guy's girlfriend. I don't know what happened in the days after that, but I do know this. The guy's girlfriend ended it a few days later. She was sneaky and caught them. He gained a lot of weight and is still working in the same job he had as a freshman in high school. She has cheated on every person she's been with, dropped out of college to work at Friendly's, got fired, has gotten fired from every subsequent job she's had, and now is dating a middle-aged man in a garage metal band who can barely play his instrument, and spends all day taking care of his 3 kids. She has now cheated on him too. I have a great job, make good money, been with the same faithful person, hey babe, for over 4 years, and have 2 cats. It's always great to see your abuser fail. This happened to my mom back in the early 80s. My mom, 14, and sister, 8. Back then they lived about 9 miles from their school. Mom was a badass, but her sister was bratty kid that always got picked on. Here comes bully threatening her little sister. They live 1 bus stop apart out in the Bonnies. Sister is scared. Tells mom. Mom says nobody picks on you but me. Bully tells them she is gonna get off on their stop and kick both their ass. Bus stops. Mom and sister haul us to house where mom grabs loaded 22 near front door and runs back to bus stop to meet bully. Bully is 50 yards away near bus stop sign. Mom warns bully not to take another step. Naturally, bully takes 2 steps. So mom pings the sign about 5 feet from her head. Bully runs home. Mom now worried about getting arrested for almost killing someone. Never messed with either of them again. Forever known as a badass in my eyes. Sorry for grammar. Typing from phone, so trying to make this as short as possible. My family and I went to a cabin up in the mountains with some friends. The friend was dating this guy that had a super annoying daughter who was spoiled rotten. In the morning we got all decked out in our snow gear and went and found a beautiful hill to go sledding on. My brother and I, 12 and 10 respectively, wanted to be the first people to go down to test it out and make sure it was safe for everyone else who were younger than us, but the stupid super annoying girl threw a tantrum. After about 5 minutes of screaming that she had to go first, I put her on the back of the sled to replace me, so it was my brother and her. They started going down the hill and a mini avalanche triggered which caused a nice 5-foot gap about halfway down the hill. The sled didn't make the full length of the gap and the front slammed into the snow. The whiplash made the super annoying girl slam her face into the back of my brother's head, knocking out her 2 front teeth. Before the pain set in, she turned back to us to say something. I don't remember what she said, because as soon as she opened her mouth to talk, blood started squirting out all over the white snow. She then started screaming and ran back to the cabin, while the rest of us had fun sledding for the next couple of hours. Needless to say, we couldn't find her white teeth in the white snow. Edited format to made. I used to work at a place that had showers at work. Working full time while going to school full time meant that I would often take a shower at work. I had a shampoo bottle that I left at work with the understanding that no one would use it. Common sense, it isn't yours, don't use it, right? But within 2 weeks it was empty. I showered at work every day, but not enough to go through that much shampoo point. So I bought a new one and taped a note on it saying it was mine. Please don't use it. But once again the shampoo was gone in even less time. Probably out of spite, I was pissed. So I indicated my irritation with an act of revenge. I pissed in my now empty bottle of shampoo and left it there for the shampoo thief. 2 days later I go and take my usual shower and see the bottle on the floor of one of the showers. Empty. Point. Now I never got to see my act of vengeance in person, but in my mind I can imagine it. There are but 2 ways you apply shampoo, either onto your hands then your head, or directly onto your head. Either way, I'm happy with the results of my treachery. Growing up, my mom had taught me to watch what I say, because I may never know who is in my presence. Being the young little teen that I was, I didn't see the value in her wisdom until I met this bisexual girl we'll call Beth. Beth was a horrible person, but still had good grades and was already accepted to a state university the winter of our senior year. She was rude, mean, and would call me Blackie anytime she would see me. Strike one. Anyway, she was dating a girl in my current circle of friends at the time, and we had all planned on going to prom together except Beth, who inevitably left her girlfriend to go to prom on her own with the rest of my friends. Strike 2. The next morning, I'm resting my head on my desk tired from prom weekend when she walks in talking to another class about how she had threesome with another girl and a guy the other night. Now, I know that the girl wasn't her girlfriend because she was chilling with my crew the entire night and slept at another person's house. Strike 3. So after hearing this, I casually drop this bomb in a conversation within my friend group and word gets back to the girlfriend and that did not go so well. Next day, Beth comes up to me and tells me watch your faking mouth or else, which isn't intimidating coming from 5'5" white girl, but still rubbed me the wrong way. After class begins, the deputy resource officer walks in and tells Beth to come to his office immediately, and that's the last time I see her for the next few weeks. Come to find out that Beth was a user and had oxycodone and a bunch of other pills in her backpack that day in class. She was suspended and received violations, but that wasn't the icing on the cake. The university found out about her little problem and rescinded her admission to their school. I learned the meaning behind my mom's words and died of laughter that day. TLDR calm as a beach because Beth faked her and didn't call her back. Edit. Formatting. To anyone living in Maryland, you might know a road called Route 1. I was doing my usual route to get home and skip all the military base traffic by cutting across Route 1 and head into a few other small town areas. Well, I roll up to my red light. First car in line. I'm hyped because that means I could nail the next 3 lights all green and say goodbye traffic, hello home. My light changes and I take my usual look left and right, mostly left because Route 1 is one way only, and I notice this girl rolling up fast. So I slow my own roll and don't jump the gun on green. Girl straight blasts through a red light. I mean doesn't even try to stop, and I can't even tell if she's looking at her phone, the road, or what. I scream out a few swears because had I gone I would have been wrecked. That's when the cop car took cars behind me and to my right lit up like a Christmas tree of sweet carom justice, weaved between traffic and gunned it after the stupid girl and served sweet justice for running that red light. I might have shouted a few boom beach suck it as I rolled through my green light, happy to know that I wasn't hit by her and that she was going to get a lovely fine for blowing through that red light. When I was in middle school, I was painfully shy. I started riding the bus home one year when my dad couldn't pick me up from school anymore. A bunch of high schoolers in the back saw me writing in my notebook one day and thought that I was writing down what they were doing / saying to knock on them to the bus driver. They started calling me names, saying they were going to steal my notebook and burn it. I dreaded the bus rides home every day. This one HS girl who wore Marilyn Manson shirts every single day was relentless. There I was, 12 years old, and she was calling me a narc, a slutch, and lots of, vulgar words I didn't know at 12. One day she started throwing wads of paper at me for literally no reason. I'd never said a word to her before, but I finally stood up and was like, leave me alone, damn it. She and her stupid friends starting cracking up. I'd actually made my situation worse. That day, she fell down off the bus as she was getting off, busted her head open. We could see the blood. The whole bus full of kids, even her friends, were laughing at her as her mom came running out of the house in her bathrobe. I'll never forget it. The teasing tapered off eventually. Still, I started going home with a friend not long after that, because I hated my bus so much. Me and my mom were following some douche in a lifted truck down a back road when he swerves to hit a cat. Goes too far off the road, misses the cat, hits something pretty substantial, blows out 2 tires. Another time, my grandma and my mom are taking me and my sis to Branson. We stop at this McDonald's, eat, and as we're leaving, my mom looks over to see this meth head couple smoking cigs by their car. My mom smiles at them, and the dude literally snarls, the fuck are you looking at, beach? My mom just kind of blinks at them, pointedly says nothing, and we go get gas. We had to wait in line, so it took a while. Back out on the highway, a few miles down, we see the couple parked on the side of the road with their hood up with smoke coming out. My mom wants to help them. Granny rolls the window down on her side, passenger side, studies their hopeful smiling faces, and goes, what are you looking at, jackass? We stare at them for a beat, then mom peels out. Mom acted upset, but I could tell she was trying not to smile. I was standing at a street light waiting for it to allow me to cross. There was a guy on the other side, furiously pounding at the crosswalk button. He was all red, obviously very upset. He loses his patience and starts to cross, but as he does, a truck flies through the intersection and nearly, not so nearly, hits him. He immediately raised his hands shouting. The truck stopped. The angry man begins sprinting towards the pulled over truck, and out emerged a guy with a hat. The hat fellow puts up his hands and asks the angry man to chill out, but the angry man resisted and forced his arms towards the hat-head fellow, to whom replied with a twist and a thrust which ended them both on the ground, the hat-head fellow on top. I ran from where I was to make sure everyone was okay. Somebody nearby the bus stop was using a phone to record the situation. The angry man, who was now quite a bit more upset, lay face down on the asphalt of the street, panting. The hat-head fellow asked, are you going to relax? He agreed, and they both stood up. The angry man stormed off quickly. I asked the hat-head fellow his condition. He shook his head, laughed and hastily got back in his truck and left. I've always wondered what happened to that angry man that day, what set him off on this cascade of painful events. From the anger that found him before the street light, to the anger he felt after leaving the fight that he lost. HM. So the second semester of my senior year of college, I had to take one required intensive writing class. I did my research and found a 200 level introduction to poetry class. I had a very light and easy class load for my last semester, and this class was the only one that actually mattered, so I made it a point to show up and do the work. Come to find out that this class was far from easy, and the grad student teaching it was new to the school. After a few weeks, the prof goes on to tell the class of about 50 students, 45 female vs 5 male, her life story. She was raised in a small town, was in band her whole life, got a band scholarship, got a scholarship to a very good grad school, ended up here for her doctorate, was made fun of her entire life, never had a boyfriend until recently, and had body imagine issues. If I remember correctly, these are some of the things that got her into poetry. I don't really remember. Anyway, weeks go by and my grade begins to slip lower and lower, despite showing up to every class, going to office hours, and completing all of the required work and then some. As the semester continues, I become pretty close with the people that regularly attend, and the semester is nearing completion. My grade is in the shitter at this point, so I begin to ask some of the people I'm close with what they are getting on assignments, tests, and their overall grade for the semester. After polling about 7 of the women and 3 of the 5 men, all of the women have B's or better, and the 4 5th guy dropped the class. Men all had D's. Now I realize first, I'm in no way shape or form a wonderful writer, nor am I that intelligent overall, but at the same time, I had never done poorly at any type of academic situation. Anyway, semester ends, I get a D+, and I graduate. After the semester ends, I check the grade distribution of the class I took, a service offered by our depth of registration to check class size, average grade, grade breakdowns, ECT, to find out every person that took the class got a B or higher, while 4 people had D+. I will let you draw your own conclusion, and I will just leave my opinion at, I was not happy with the outcome of the class, ruined GPA and almost did not graduate. Fast forward about 2 years, I'm browsing the interwebs and come across an article with a picture of which I immediately recognize. The article is titled something along the lines of blah 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 poetry blah 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 tragically dies. I think to myself, no way that this is her. Well, it wasn't. Apparently she had passed away in a rock climbing accident. Don't get me wrong, I was not happy to hear this news, merely surprised, but at the same time, maybe a little karma. Point TLDR, college professor gives all 4 men in her class a bad grade, ruining my GPA and almost causing me to not graduate college. Find out shortly after she passed away in an accident. Had been in the fence biz for about 8 years when the big boss decided to hire this idiot to be over me and the people I ran as a crew. I was a foreman, I guess. Well, I had to teach this old dog new tricks because he didn't know the system. He's carpenter by trade. Point now, I don't consider being an old curmudgeon bad karma, but we were working about 9 hours from home. He lived right around the corner. He got the big boss to switch the schedule from 5 days 8 hours shifts to 4 days 10 hours shifts, so now we lost out of an extra day of per diem and had to hang out at a boring RV campground for retirees for an extra day. We went home once a month for 5 days at a time. Alright, time for that sweet karma. We had a bobcat on the job for moving pipe or tools or whatever. Well, this thing was no cherry machine. When you get out, unless you engage the e-brake, the bobcat will creep forward very slowly. So fuckhead, who was getting paid more than me, and I had to train him, runs up to the drop yard in the cat and heads into a storage connex. His search for materials is a little too slow. The bobcat crept up to the door and locked him in there for 7 hours in the broiling Florida heat and humidity. He said he was screaming pretty much the whole time, but we were on the other side of the job site and had no need for the bobcat. Some guy from a different skill finally heard him and got him out. All in all, I think he lost 5 lbs. Was dropping my then boyfriend, now husband, off at his house and watched these 3 kids under 10 throwing rocks at cars. I slowed down and yelled at them, but it didn't faze them. Left him at the house and said I'd be back in a few. Drove back around corner where kids were nowhere to be found. So I walked up to the open screen door and knocked. As soon as one of the kids saw me, I have purple hair and am very distinctive, he just started freak out bawling. Told the dad what they'd been doing, and he immediately told the one kid to go home and never come back. Told me they had just moved in, and this little faker was teaching his kids bad habits, but he'd not been able to prove it to his wife, so she kept letting him come over. His own kids got there as beat, and every time they'd see me go by they'd just stop whatever they were doing and freeze until I'd turned the corner. I'm finding that most people don't care about doing the right thing, they only care about being caught. My brother was driving doing just over the speed limit. A Mercedes overtook him illegally and then cut him off, and he had to brake heavily. My bro is chilled, whatever, no biggie, just another asshole. They get to the double lane and dumb cunt sits in the right lane. This is awesome. My bro goes past the old tosser in the left lane, probably being a little bit naughty, just to annoy this fuckhead. Point. So sheet for brains gets angry, tries to overtake my bro twice on a double line, but can't, too many cars. He eventually does get past my bro and starts brake checking him. This gaylord brakes at one point, my brother swerves into the other lane and overtakes him. Now this cumbucket is pissed, he follows my brother home. Point now we live in the country, so our driveway is a kilometers long. My bro is still being followed along the driveway. Either it's one of my mates, or he is about to be in a fight. He pulls up into the garage, AMD walks out to the front of the house. As face drives up they death stare through this cunt's window. Before he opens his door straight into a pot plant his head drops, my bro just laughs and walks inside the gate. I don't know if I'd count it as karma, but it's justice in its own right. So, in high school, I'm in the UK by the way, so for American users, I think that's 7th 12th grade. Not sure. This guy I had been friends with for probably 10 years or more. I was 16 at the time. Suddenly targets my then girlfriend with one of the most disgraceful things I've heard anyone say. He called her a flat-chested bitch with no standards because she was dating a waste of life like me. Just gonna say it now, I didn't care that she didn't have born statistics. Body isn't everything. I'm still friends with her now. I digress anyway, so I didn't retaliate on the spot. It was exam times, GCSEs, and I just concentrated on those. After exams finished, I made it a mission to humiliate the faker. He'd pissed a lot of people off, so I got talking to everyone I could to dig up all the dirt I could on him. I found so much, and posted every last thing on his Facebook wall for all his friends and mine to see. To this day, it's my most liked post, because I had the balls to do something about him. Here's some of the things. Lied to his then girlfriend about having early stages of mouth/throat cancer when her mother recently lost the battle to cancer. I did not mention her name in the post per her request, but I gave her some friendly words to comfort her. Lied about losing his virginity. He still is now and still lies apparently. Claimed to be able to buy marijuana whenever he wanted. Truth was he never provided it, only pinched it off others. Claimed to have banged a prostitute. He was dumb enough to say her real name to us when we were friends. I looked her up, and she was a prospective student with a boyfriend. Needless to say, he was so embarrassed. He had the balls to phone me and demand I take the post down. I told him where to stick it and put the phone down. A week later, he spots me in the street while I was heading home from a friend's house. He runs up to me, goes to swing, and I swung first, flooring him instantly. Broke a knuckle, but it was worth it. It felt so good. TLDR friend of 10 years insulted my then girlfriend and me hard. I dug up dirt and publicly humiliated him, then punched him in the face a week later. Feels good, man. I decided to move out of my mom's place around last June. Moved in with one of my buddies who lived nearby. We came to an agreement that I'd give X amount for rent every month. He also happened to be really close with this female, who was once his ex-girlfriend from high school. As months went by, she convinced my buddy more and more to live with her instead of renewing his lease in August, like he told me he would. Eventually, he decided to move in with her and told me last second that I had to get out since he was not renewing the lease. I moved out in the beginning of the month, so I didn't have to pay rent for the final month. Turns out that she bailed on him last minute when he was ready to move in with her and already told the leasing office that he was moving out for good. As of now, he is no longer talking to this beach and lives with his parents again. I couldn't have picked a better situation. To say that karma bit him in the ears hard really shows you how trustworthy an ex-girlfriend can be. So, this wasn't a personal thing that's happened to me, but something I had seen on the news and legitimately made me laugh at their misfortune. In July, my state found a dead girl in a suitcase next to a highway. Investigation ensued. After a few months, they found out who it was, and that this little girl's mother was also found dead a few years before. But something was wrong. Police discovered that someone was entering the dead mother's bank account to access welfare money long after the mother had been found dead. Security camera footage from the specific bank showed a woman pretending to be in a wheelchair entering the bank and taking money out as guardian for the deceased woman. Well, recently police have tracked down who this wheelchair woman was and are pressing charges. But not even a month ago, she was involved in a car crash with another person who was also under investigation for the same crimes, and the result of the car crash is that she is now paraplegic. TLDR, a woman who was pretending to be in a wheelchair to access a dead person's bank account was in a car crash that resulted in her becoming a paraplegic and properly needing a wheelchair. Justice is served. Two traffic-related ones come to mind. Jackass in a pickup truck is in a hurry to make a right turn at a busy intersection during rush hour traffic and can't be bothered to wait his turn like everybody else. He guns it and pulls into the corner gas station with the intention of driving out the other side to shortcut the right turn point. What he didn't realize, the other side of the gas station was blocked off due to construction. He couldn't get out, had to turn around and get back out onto the street the way he came, but now he had to wait due to all the traffic to even get back out onto the street too. Rush hour afternoon traffic in Silicon Valley. Sitting in the right lane, creeping along, patiently waiting to get into the right exit lane to get on the bridge. Some yahoo behind me couldn't be bothered to wait his turn, pulls out on the shoulder and starts passing everybody on the shoulder to get into the exit lane. What he didn't realize, there was a cop on the shoulder that had just pulled over somebody else. The cop saw him approach on the shoulder, stepped around the vehicle he had pulled over, pointed at the yahoo coming down the shoulder, and pointed to the side, pulling him over right then and there just with his finger. Awesome. Both times I sat in my car watching and applauding vertical bar. I'm a little late to the party, but it's not often I have a story worth sharing, so here it goes. After watching football at a friend's house, I was driving home with my fairly intoxicated boyfriend. I stopped to turn left a red light instead of staying straight and cutting through a neighborhood, which could have potentially saved us a minute of driving time. My boyfriend completely lost his mind over this, and for the rest of the drive home he yelled and beached about how stupid it was to stop at the red light point once home. He decided to have some apple pie. The apple pie reminded him that at the store earlier that day, we got the apple pie that I picked out and not the one that he picked out. So the rant continues about how much I don't care about him or making him happy. Mid-rant, he opens the utensil drawer to grab a fork in the drawer, which in 5 years has never been off the track, falls clean off the track and lands corner down onto his big toe. The toe is broken. And it was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. It was like the universe yelled, "Shut the fuck up." So I didn't have to. When I was just about to graduate college, I visited my brother, and he had some people over one night. A woman who was there was a lawyer, and I had talked about wanting to go to law school. And instead of saying oh, cool, she decided to tell me why I couldn't do it, and that I was stupid for wanting to. Mind you, this is also in group conversation, so everyone at the party was privy. A little later I had talked about traveling, and was going to Europe. Cool, right? Not to this lady. People who travel to Europe are stupid, and you can only get a true experience by going to Thailand and such. A few other topics went like this. Well, she had to leave. When I went down to my car later, she was still there trying to hail a cab. One came by, and she basically tried to jump in front of it, but it just kept going. Haha, this was like 3 AM, and she had been down there for about 45 to an hour. I took much solace in that. A few years ago, on July 4th, I was driving down this really flat road by my house. The speed limit is 40 miles per hour, which is ridiculous, but I always follow it, because I don't want to waste my time or money dealing with a ticket point as I'm crawling along the road doing 40 miles per hour. This really tall pickup truck comes up on my ass. After following me for a minute, it floors it around me on a double yellow. As it passed me, I saw that it had an out-of-state license plate, which just pissed me off even more. About 20 seconds later we come up to a red light and the truck gets into the left turn lane. I was going straight and there were a few cars in front of me, so I was still behind the truck in the other lane point. Before I could come to a complete stop, a police car with its lights on comes up behind me and gets behind the truck. When the light turned green I could see the truck and the police car make the left turn and then immediately pull over. I was ecstatic, because it was the first time I had seen a jackass who pulled this kind of shit on me get pulled over. Okay, so this just happened to me last week. I was playing basketball at LA Fitness, and as most people who play at LA know, there's usually a group of regulars who show up every day to play. I'm playing defense on this one dude, let's call him White Iverson, and he is straight up destroying me. Like, this was the worst basketball experience of my life. This dude made me fall and crossed me over a total of 4 times and hit the shot on me every damn time. I'm pretty sure this guy just got me psychologically. Once he hit me with the first crossover, I was paranoid and was focusing too hard on his dribbling, causing me to bite over and over and over Everyone was hooting and hollering, but one of the regulars on the sidelines, let's call him Napoleon, would just not stop giving me shit about this, yelling so loud about how I needed to get off the court for like 10 minutes. Honestly, this 30-year-old guy is just annoying the hell out of me, and to make it worse, the other regulars were trying to reassure me that it wasn't that bad. Napoleon plays the next game guarding White Iverson, and White Iverson crossed him 6 times in a row. He was getting destroyed. Oh god, it was the best feeling I've ever had on the court, and I've made game winning buzzer beaters. Napoleon is getting shredded on defense worse than I was, and it got so bad that his embarrassment overshadowed mine. Karma is a faking beach Napoleon. I have a 2-for-1 story. I was driving with my mom one day down a 1.5 lane country road that we often used to go places and avoid the major route. On this road, there's what I like to call a tunnel of trees that's in a low spot. At the end of said tunnel, the road turns somewhat sharply to the left. So, here we are, me and my mom, minding our own. Then some guy comes up behind us in a big hurry. He then overtakes us on the left, then plows right into the ditch on that sharp left turn. We just kept on driving like nothing happened. Secondly, and I haven't witnessed this one, I wonder if that counts, and also, I would love to see it. Some guy from high school named Steven was just the biggest dick to me for little to no reason. After 4 years of his arrogance and vile presence, I later found out that he fancied himself a stand-up comic, which consisted of continually mocking the girl he was with at the time, who later told me about this, and that he had ballooned over I think it was 20 pounds. Have to say that I felt vindicated after hearing that. I was dealing with an irate customer at a phone store I used to work at. It was a fairly large store, and it was packed that day, while this customer was causing a scene. What irritated me the most about the situation was she wasn't even our client. The issue she had was a billing issue with the provider she signed up with. Anyhow, after 15 minutes of yelling in my face and not accepting the fact that she f'd up by coming into the store for an issue that was not related to us, she turns around, kisses her teeth and tries to storm out. Luckily for me and everyone at the store that day, one of my staff was redoing the from window display. He had taken all the boxes and moved it to the back room and had not replaced it with the new merch. Picture a 200-pound lady trying to storm out of the store, that upset bouncing walk and all, and then wham, right into the window. The whole store erupted in laughter before I attempted to go help her up anyways, but out of sheer embarrassment she got up and bolted out the door. I have another traffic related story. I was on a motorway, driving on the slow lane at the speed limit of 110 kilometers. There was a fair amount of traffic on the road, but not enough to say it was congested. This Holden driver zoomed up out of nowhere and rode my tail at a very uncomfortable distance, then swerved out suddenly at a very fast speed and proceeded to dangerously overtake the other cars ahead by zigzagging between the two lanes. It was scary the speed he was going, and his reckless driving manner. No sooner had I said the word, "Where are the cops when you need them?" Then we passed over a crest, and there on the left were 2 patrol cars and a police officer running and jumping into his car. Both cars immediately put on their lights and sirens and took off. A couple of minutes later, we passed the Holden driver on the side of the road and the cops getting out of their car. I've never witnessed anything like it before nor since, and it really made my day. I love to retell this story. It was awesome. So I'm like half a day late to this thread, but meh, here's mine anyway. I went to the beach with a group of friends and we went in one car together. One friend, Bob, had just gotten this fanciest baseball cap from his parents. Thing cost like $40 or some ridiculous amount. Bob was in love with this freaking hat. I was wearing this cheap ass hat I had bought from an army surplus store. It was just to wear while at the beach, so I didn't care. Bob was playfully making fun of my shitty hat, and I happened to get dunked by a wave and my hat floated away into the wide blue yonder. Bob thought this was hilarious and was making fun of me in the car. Ride home. I was in the back seat and Bob had shotgun. As we were driving along this busy main road, Bob saw a guy walking along the road wearing a massive sun hat that was bright blue. So Bob leans out the window and yells, "Nice hat." And a gust of wind happens to blows Bob's hat clean off his head. Bob is freaking out and yelling at our friend that's driving to please stop and let him get his hat. Driving friend is pissing himself laughing and saying he can't because we were doing about 80 kilometers and there was nowhere to stop and the hat was long gone. TLDR. Bob had a fancy hat. Bob made fun of everyone else's hats. Bob's hat breaks up with him. The asshole in me tends to yell out and Nelson Muntz laugh at people who have been pulled over on the highway. I've been doing this for a while now, so at this point it's second nature. Well, on my way back home to the suburbs from Chicago, my girlfriend and I spotted a car that had been pulled over on the opposite side of the highway. So, I rolled down my window and, obviously, gave a very obnoxious haha. And subsequently forgot about it. 10 minutes later, I see red and blue lights flashing in my rearview mirror. The officer pulled me over for speeding. I was going 85 miles per hour in a 65, which was more or less the speed everyone else around me was traveling. Most of the time I'm driving faster, so it was strange that I got pulled over. Regardless, I was asked for my driver's license and insurance. I had my driver's license on me, but couldn't find my insurance card. In the end, I left with 2 tickets. One for speeding, and one for not having my insurance card. My insurance was in my glove compartment all along. Karma. Once I get on the subway going downtown in Manhattan, the train doors open on one side for local stops, and the other side for express. Being morning rush hour at an express stop, people were crowding in, and this one woman was being completely obnoxious, forcing her way into a full car. The doors took a few tries before they barely closed behind her, but she wouldn't get off and try another door or wait for another train. We proceeded through the next few local stops, and everyone was using the doors on the opposite side of the car, while the obnoxious woman remained leaning against the express set of doors. Then we get to her stop, another local. People pile out, and as soon as she gets some room to move, she realizes she's stuck in the door because it closed on her jacket. So she begins flailing her arms and yelling, "My stop! Help!" And everybody is just laughing at her. There isn't much time before the doors close and she then has to wait until the next express stop for her door to open, and then of course she had to double back. It really livened up the morning commute. I was going through a fast food drive-thru, and before it's my turn to order, a man walks up to my car window and asks if I could please buy his girlfriend a combo with water. I look over at his extremely pregnant girlfriend sitting on the curb sweating profusely in the above 100 temp. I agree, of course, and she asks for a large Big Mac combo with Coke and water. I ask her boyfriend if he is hungry as well. He said that he's really picky and the order is complicated, so he'd rather not bother me with it. I instead hand him a 10. I knew that there was a good chance at him using it for an addiction, but I also wanted them to at least have the option of water and a meal. Afterward, I pull up, give her boyfriend the meal, and go about my business. After running errands in the same shopping center, I see the couple walking across the street. Only the pregnant girlfriend was now 98 pounds and holding a king-size pillow. They go to their fairly new car and meet up with what turns out to be undercover cops. I can't say it was a great feeling, but I did whisper justice out loud to myself. I'm late but I'll contribute anyway. Years ago, when I was maybe 9 or 10, I was sitting with my best friend and my little sister on our front porch as we usually did in the summertime. My mom was really big on gardening, so she had several very tall sunflowers along the perimeter of the front yard, which was surrounded by a chain link gate. We lived in an urban area. This girl, who I don't think I knew or had even seen before, comes breezing down the sidewalk on her bike, looks right into my eyes, and snaps one of my mom's beautiful sunflowers as she passes. Once she was out of earshot, my sister says, "I hope she gets hit by a car." For some reason or other we got off of the porch a few seconds later, went through the gate, and headed in the direction opposite of the girl on the bike, toward my friend's house next door. All of a sudden we hear a screech, bang, and we spin around, and there in the intersection at the other end of the road is the girl's bike and the girl lying a few feet away from it, and the car that hit her. Not before long, the street fills with people who call 911 and go to see if she's okay. My sister probably thought she was a witch or a psychic or something after that happened. Not saying this girl deserved to get hit by a car for snatching my mom's flower, it's just odd that it happened. She was okay, though. She was conscious and everything. I didn't see her again after that. Not as severe as a lot of these as it involves a mobile game and a Twitch stream, but it's relevant and only happened just last night, so I'll share it. I'm in a streamer's chat, talking with him, because he was streaming our war, RWCS mixed 45v45 scrim, Clash of Clans, and I'm jokingly sheet talking the other side. I tell the guy I'm going to be attacking, but I'm panicking, because he tells me he's gonna put me on the stream and watch me attack live. So I rush into the attack, and don't bother to check my troops out. I didn't bring any faking wall breakers. I forgot to sub out a giant and a goblin for them points, so here I am, screaming fuck audibly, and taking deep breaths in the 30 seconds that I have to get myself mentally ready, working out how to adapt to this newfound problem. I proceed with the go-ho and drop my jump on the outside, and then fumble hogs instead of funneling wizards to start my kill squad going inside point TFW sheet talking, and then getting 50% 2-star. This was this girl I knew in high school who also happened to go to the same church as I did at the time. She was your typical overweight, always saying how good she looks kind of beach. She had a nasty habit of starting drama and spreading lies about people just for fun. Well, to make this story a bit shorter, she tried to ruin 2 different relationships of mine by trying to act like their friend and tell them how I was cheating on them, even though both of them knew that wasn't that case. So imagine how that sounds when everyone else is saying that and causing problems between us. She even tried doing this to someone I barely knew. That person I had barely hung out with before, and she talked shit every chance she got about me to them. Luckily they saw through that point. Well, fast forward a couple years. Her dad lost his job, causing him to lose his house, and her family still lives in a homeless shelter to this day. And on top of that, both her parents now have major kidney problems from being fat as fuck, and it could possibly kill them both. That sounds faking morbid, but hey, karma is a beach. So in high school I was fat, not obese, just fat, but I played a lot of sports and even had the dedication to wake up at 5 AM twice a week to get a 45-minute bus to school to do archery club. I was also known for being a goalie who wasn't afraid to take out a few shins with my padded legs if they were in my crease. I played for the girls' high school team, but practiced with the guys, and played in a boys' house league. Well, there was a skinny bleach blonde, let's call her Ashley, that for some reason thought she could pick on me, especially in gym class. Loved to tease me and some of my friends, toss basketballs at the back of our heads, or kick us accidentally during soccer. I was taught never to use violence first. I can defend myself, but not strike first. So one day she tries to pull my shorts down during class. I don't even think I grab her wrist before she can pull my, thankfully high-waisted, shorts down more than half an inch. I tell her, you really don't want to try me. She takes a swing, and I raise my other arm and block her. I don't flinch, and she's rubbing her hand. She marches off all pissed off. Q 4 days of archery in gym. Since I'm in archery club I have a proper glove and wrist guard of my own. I can also use the heavier bows. Ashley is stuck with a basic plastic orange bow that most of the class uses. I'm lining up my shots and having trouble hitting the target because of the blunted tip arrows we use in class. Finally I just politely ask if I can use my regular arrows, and because I'm a good student and the teacher has seen me in archery club, the teacher says yes, so I set down my bow on the table and go to fetch my own arrows. I come back, and Ashley has my bow in her hands. She's pulling the string back, and I wince, because I know what's about to happen, and I won't get there to stop her. Her form is so terrible. Not only did she struggle to pull the string back, but when she released it, the string caught her unprotected forearm, slicing into it, and causing a huge welt. She's crying and is told to sit to the side. Punishment because the class was strictly told not to mess with the heavier bows without permission. When I was driving through West Virginia to visit some family this past summer, some guy almost killed me by driving like a maniac on the highway. I was in the leftmost lane going about 5 to 10 miles per hour faster than traffic in the middle lane, and right as I was moving up, to pass a car in the middle lane. This guy, who had been barreling down the highway going easily 20 to 30 miles per hour over the limit, way faster than anyone else on the road, cut over in front of me. There was barely too little room for his truck to fit between my car and the one I was about to pass, but luckily my reflexes kicked in, and I braked soon enough that he didn't clip my front bumper. Unfortunately, I braked too hard and started losing control of my car, which was swerving violently back and forth, sort of like the wobbles on a skateboard. I was going pretty fast, and as I tried to regain control of the car, it crossed my mind that I legitimately might not be able to flip or crash and probably die. I don't know how, but all of a sudden the car came back under my control, and I was able to steady myself out safely. I ended up calling 911 to report the guy for reckless driving, but I apparently got part of his license plate number wrong, so the police could only keep a lookout for such driving further up the road. The truck drove up ahead of me far enough that I lost sight of it, but about 10 minutes later I noticed that there was black smoke coming up from the end of an exit ramp. As I got closer, I saw that it was the truck that had almost caused me to crash, or one that looked identical to it, and it appeared to have smashed into the rear end of a tractor trailer. I sincerely hope that everyone was alright and unharmed, but some part of me couldn't help but be satisfied that the guy who needlessly endangered my life on the road had his reckless driving come around to bite him in the ass. A lady started to catch the same train as me from the same end of the platform and would walk right up to where the doors would open, the busiest spot on the platform, and start smoking. When she was done, she'd throw the cigarette butt onto the tracks and exhale her last breath in the train carriage. Point how I fucking hated this bitch. Over the days my hatred grew past the point of being satisfied by just moving to a new carriage. I would dread the sight of her and her stupid shoes strutting up the platform. One day she was doing her thing while I silently directed all my hate at her in a focus beam of malevolence. When the train pulled up, I got on and immediately turned to see her get on behind me and blow smoke all over the place when she just crumpled to the ground. There was a silent gasp from the onlookers, and a few people started to ask if she was alright as she got up shakily to her feet before falling flat on her face again. I couldn't help it anymore and just burst out laughing. I'm sure most people though I was a total asshole, but there was that one guy who looked at me and smiled. He knew. We mentally high-fived. It was fucking awesome. Oh man, I've got one point. So there was this girl. Let's call her Allison, because this has been so long that I honestly don't remember her name, but I'm pretty sure I've at least got the first letter right. I moved around a lot as a kid, and during high school I left my home city and group of friends, but came back and reunited with them less than a year later. When I came back, Allison had materialized, dating a friend of mine. Despite being his girlfriend, she would really blatantly, really uncomfortably hit on me. She wasn't a bad person or anything. I honestly kind of liked her and would have been receptive if she wasn't with my friend at the time. But she was, so I just shut her down every chance I got and avoided her whenever possible. They eventually split up for reasons that had nothing to do with me and mostly were to do with her being a bit crazy. So, a couple of years later I'm living in a different part of town. Pretty much don't see those friends anymore. Who do I run into? Just completely coincidentally, walking home. You guessed it. We are both single. We hit it off instantly. I'm living alone and nearby, so I invite her up to my apartment. We hang out for an enjoyable few hours, and then she starts talking about the man she's apparently living with, but somehow not romantically involved with or something, even though she was before, and goes on about how she wants to be a psychologist, and is diagnosing all these ridiculous problems with this guy I didn't even know existed, and she isn't taking any of my hints to leave, and is just sitting there going on about this. I'm absolutely aghast at the amount of crazy on display, and eventually have to be very blunt to make her leave, making it clear that I'm going to push her out the damn door if she doesn't walk out it on her own, because she is no longer welcome, and I need to sleep. Didn't really mention this before, but that apartment was overlooking a pretty major intersection. As my bed was right by the front window, I got very used to sleeping through traffic noises, screaming and tire screeching, though unusual enough to wake me up. So I stare blearily out the window, and guess who's there, screaming bloody murder, because she was stupid enough to jaywalk like 20 feet from the intersection, and get her leg broken by a fairly slow moving car pulling into the turning lane. You guessed it. I was in an argument with one of my friends in middle school. She was a homegrown Southern Baptist that had been raised in the church and thought that her relationship with God was superior to everyone else's. During the argument, she tells me that I should never have been born because my parents were not married when I was conceived. I dropped the argument and left, never speaking to her again. Somehow, we ended up friends on Facebook and second semester of our freshman year in college, I see a picture of an ultrasound. Curious, I glance up at the name and sure enough, she was pregnant. Not only was she pregnant out of wedlock, she also was attending a private Bible college and was promptly kicked out of school. She never returned, and the baby daddy is in his whole point now. While karma was a beach to her, I will say that her little girl is really cute and she still seems happy. But when I discovered that ultrasound image and connected it to her, I don't think I've ever felt justice served so neatly. I'm not saying this was the case, but he may have run the red light because of a mechanical issue. I can see a broken control arm taking out a brake line point. Not too long ago I turned off a busy road onto a side street. A couple women in a grey Oldsmobile was heading toward the intersection at a normal pace. I only noticed them because I heard what sounded like a single tire squealing. As they went by I looked in my side mirror just in time to see them plow through the red light and got hit by a semi. The newspaper said the wheels on the trailer got them. I honestly don't now. I was looking at it in a side mirror, and it happened too fast for me to make out any details. The sound of that impact will haunt me for years. I was in a heavy work truck going the opposite direction with the windows rolled up, and I'm pretty sure I felt a boom, but that may be my imagination. Point anyway, I got turned around and drove over a couple of yards to get to the car, but by then a bunch of construction workers from the gas station across the street had gotten to them and were pulling the passenger out of the car. Fortunately they survived, but the driver had to be cut out of the wreckage point. After thinking about it, I believe she must have lost a brake line, and the noise I heard was one of the back tires dragging. It probably caught her by surprise. Instead of pumping the brakes she probably just pressed harder and couldn't get enough pressure to the working front brake to make much of a difference. Point she wasn't speeding and her brake lights were on point. I made sure to stay around and told the police what I'd seen and left my contact information. A bit late, but whatever, there was a road I had to take to get to my college that went through a very rural area. For whatever reason, there would always be someone going under the speed limit with a huge line of cars behind them because everyone was too scared to pass in the passing zones. Didn't matter what time of day or day of the week, always happened. Point one day, I'm driving back after break and come upon one of these lines of cars. I'm about 8 cars deep, so there's no way I'm getting out of there anytime soon. A couple miles later, this older model red Porsche whips around me and blasts up to the front of the line and just keeps on going. Point this little stunt gave some of the other drivers the courage to go for it, and I was finally able to pass. A few miles after that, I round this bend, and there's the Porsche, pulled over, with a very pissed off looking cop standing at the window. I had a good laugh and kept on going. I was visiting home the other weekend from college, and as I was driving to the bus station I saw some sweet justice. Point so on the way to the station there's a 1.5 kilometers or so stretch of road that's pretty bad and roughed up, and obviously, it being night and all, I was driving casually and a bit more carefully than usual. Now, the road, although at a lane, is pretty narrow, and overtaking can be a bit tricky, especially when nearing the short bridge at the end of it. As I'm nearing the bridge, some fuckface in a brand new Range Rover behind me starts flashing his lights and sorta swerving from one side to another in an effort to overtake me, although there's basically zero faking room and it's a pretty busy road. Naturally, he can't get an opportunity to do it until we cross the bridge and the road widens into a pretty cozy 4-lane avenue. So, as soon as I crossed the bridge, fuckwit McSheethead sped right past me in an effort to show off awesome shit, and I continued to drive normally, stopping at a red light the aforementioned sheep eater managed to pass through while the light was still green. The light turns green again, and I continue driving, and by the side of the road I notice the cops pulled over a car, and guess who it is? My dear old Range Rover driving friend. Cunt head dick sniffer my Justice Bonner nearly broke the windshield when I saw that beautiful scene. I'm way too late for this, but I felt the need to tell this story. My mom was the director of the children's ministry at an old church of ours. She was absolutely incredible at her job. The number of kids attending Sunday school nearly quintupled. Now the number is half of what it was before my mom started working there. The pastor was an asshole, to put it lightly. This guy talked shit about people behind their backs constantly. He was mean to the staff. However, he was the worst to my mom. Mom's pay was cut, and she ended up with half the hours. The pastor expected the same amount of work to get done, which was impossible. When mom couldn't get everything done, the pastor went nuts. He started talking shit about her to the whole church. Mom quit, and she and I were basics exiled from the church. My dad and brother are still in the music program there. They have the largest and best handbell choirs in the country. Everyone there treats my mom and me like trash. The only time we ever go back is for the handbell musicals, and people are assholes to us even now. About 7 years later, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. He died in a few months. Serves him right. This is more of a karma could be a beach if I wanted it to story. The chairman of a major record label hates me, and the phone rang one day from his number and I figured he was going to go apeshit, so I sent it to voicemail, set up a recorder, then called him back. He went on a 20-minute tirade calling me everything in the book. It was the most vile meltdown I've ever heard, calling me worthless faking prick and stupid motherfucker and stuff like that at the top of his lungs. Then he threatened twice to fight me. I believe his exact words were kick your faking ass. Well, as I mentioned, I recorded the entire thing. This is legal in my state, and put the recordings on micro SD cards. This was shortly before an album release, so when I sent my CDs out to the media for review, I popped the CD tray out of them and taped the micro SD cards in there containing the tirade. If he ever threatens me again, all I have to do is send a quick text to anyone who has these recordings and tell them there's a surprise hiding behind the CD tray, and they should run it with the headline major record label chairman's insane profanity-riddled meltdown. They will never find this unless I tell them where to look. Who pops the CD tray out of a jewel case? Oh my good gravy god, it's story time, children. So, when I first moved into my house I had this grumpy old guy living next door. One day while I was outside chopping wood with my roommate, he comes over and says ever since I moved in he has rats. My roommate and I just kinda froze and looked at each other dumbfounded. I politely apologized for his troubles, but I didn't have rodents, so they want from me. He started yelling, and I asked him to please get off my property because he was getting hostile. He told me I was going to pay for his rat problem and stormed off. The next day I went to let my dogs outside and my house was unraveled and turned on with my backyard flooded. I checked the security cams and saw the old guy come into my yard and turn on the hose. What a jerk. Well, I decided to ignore it because I didn't want to start something big and stupid. After that I never heard anything from him again. A couple months went by. I get home from work and there are cops, ambulance, hazmat team all at this guy's house. Apparently he died and had been sitting for over a month rotting. They had to scrape him off the floor. Karma's a beach. Long story short, be nice to your neighbors. Last week, my boyfriend and I were driving in Chicago when a car pulls up alongside us on a two-lane street, so she's actually in the bike lane. I assumed this woman was going to turn right, but then I saw her look right at me and I knew what she was trying to pull. As soon as the light turned green, sure enough she tried cutting in front of us illegally. My boyfriend was driving and didn't let her. Then later we are on a bridge under construction and have to merge over. Of course, what car is right there not letting us get over? The same lady. After nearly causing an accident, the lady lets us go, making sure to blare her horn. As soon as we get over the bridge, she pulls up beside us. This time she's in the other lane of traffic. She and her friend start laughing at us, and my boyfriend flips them off. Immediately after he does this, a Hummer came and hit their car. Just kidding. It barely missed their car, but god, that would have been some sweet karma. Was pulling up to a light with a turn lane. I guess I didn't pull far enough forward to let a car get in the turn lane because the guy blasted his horn and then drove onto the sidewalk to get around me and into the turn lane. I roll forward and watch in my rear view as not one, not two, but three undercover cops all pull out of their lane and drive off after the guy who drove on the sidewalk. Was laughing so hard. The other was driving through a school zone where the light was on and we were supposed to be doing 25. Most of the cars have slowed down and there is an undercover police car driving along. Car blows down the road way over the speed limit even without the school zone light on. Tailgates the undercover cop. Seriously, it was that generic one with a bunch of big antennas on the back that everyone knows is a cop, and then passes him on the right and continues speeding down the road. No prizes for guessing what happened next. A girl I know was really condescending to everyone because she found out that she was in the top 20 of the class. She created people for going to art schools and wanting to go to non-Ivy League schools. When it came time to apply for colleges, she applied to all Ivy Leagues. No safety schools, no reach schools. She got denied to all of them, while quite a few people got into schools like NYU, MIT, and 2 students Eve got into Stanford and Princeton. She wailed all day in the counselor's office asking why they hadn't told her to apply to any safety schools. She had apparently forgotten that she told them she could do it on her own. When graduation day came, they announced what colleges the students had gotten into and what school they had chosen, and she was the only one who didn't have one. I heard she was struggling to get into a community college with rolling admissions in the summer. One rich student she sassed also had a big pool party at her big nice house, and she was also one of the few who did not get invited. I got a FB message from her after the pictures went up asking why I didn't tell her. Greater than sign close bracket. Way late on this one and it's not my story. My girlfriend got a job at a small mom-pop shop. They had a goddaughter that they would hire for summers between college. The owner's wife ran the office they worked in, and they were both very conservative Christian. The owner's wife was a crazy bitch who would yell and belittle her in front of everyone. As an example, one time she got cheat for trying to learn how to calibrate equipment, which was a part of their business that no one else in the office knew how to do. Anyway, the goddaughter and the owner's wife basically team up on my girlfriend, and, of course, the goddaughter can get away with murder. One day girlfriend goes to lunch, and the goddaughter writes beach in huge letters across a page in her notebook. Lots of these type things happen, and eventually the wife fires my girlfriend. Here's where the karma part comes in. My girlfriend is still Facebook friends with the goddaughter. Next semester she sees a post from the goddaughter who had a baby. Classic didn't know I was pregnant sheet. Goddaughter had to call her boyfriend and tell him that not only was she pregnant, but the child had arrived. Obviously they had no preparation and no jobs, both students. Some of her friends are posting on her wall things like, oh my god, that's crazy. I just saw you at the bar on Thursday and now you have a baby. Pretty shitty for the baby. My favorite part was when my girlfriend tells her very respectful father the story. His response was, well, who's he, stupid bitch now? Used to work in a large theme restaurant attached to a theme park. Own time, a group of high schoolers on a class trip came in and got seated at various tables all around the restaurant. One of the tables had 2 guys who were being total sheetheads, berating the waitress, smoking, back when there were sections for that, and just being difficult. Then the icing on the cake, they pulled a dine. Fortunately, they were too stupid to figure out that all their waitress had to do was go to one of the other tables of people that came in as part of their group, ask if they knew who they were, and had one of them find a chaperone. The chaperone then went back into the park, found them, brought them back, and made them pay up. Then, the chaperone informed cheathead #1 and #2 that they were being sent home early, were going to be boarding a flight that evening, and that their parents would be waiting for them to arrive at the airport. I so wish I could have been there when they arrived to watch the fireworks. My materialistic ex-girlfriend, who took great pleasure in treating people like shit and would have the audacity to cry on my shoulder about not having any friends. She started talking about us getting married, then informed me that her engagement ring is supposed to be worth 1/2 my yearly income. What the fuck? Then, when she started mentioning how many kids we would be having, that's where I broke silence and said I don't want any she faking. Flipped. She then throws out, well, if you won't, I'll find somebody who will. So about a month later, she gives me the boot. A few months later, I found a wonderful surfer girl who was the complete opposite of my ex. One day, about a year later, we ran across my ex at the mall, who was knocked up. We both took one look at her, busted out laughing, then walked away. Years after that, I ran into an old friend who also knew my ex, who told me how she ended up having 2 kids with some guy, got married, then got divorced not too long after that. I'm pretty sure her being a complete beach had something to do with that. Yeah, think. About 6 MOs ago, I stumbled across her Facebook page. She got divorced again recently and had to put together a GoFundMe account because he stuck her with about $2,300 in toll violations that he supposedly racked up in her car, and her license was about to be suspended. Meanwhile, my surfer girl and I just celebrated our 21st anniversary and had 4 wonderful kids. Shock. Labs. My wife was a manager of a place that was a slightly more upscale version of Subway, where they had sandwiches, wraps, soups, salads, and smoothies. The owners ran her ragged, paid her less than the managers at their other store they owned too, and quite often left her hanging due to being too cheap to order the proper amount of stock needed to run the store efficiently, which usually left her running out of menu items and dealing with the stress of that. So, one day, in the middle of her shift, she took off her apron, told the employees to tell the boss she faking quit, and walked out. They hired a younger guy to manage the place, and less than a year later, he ended up lifting about $4,000 from the cash deposits he was supposed to be making to support his gambling habit. They not only couldn't recover it, since it would have cost them more to take legal action, but they also had to spend a good amount to settle up with all the food distributors that he never paid. It turned out that, since they were too faking cheap to do a background check on their new manager, whose job was to also handle money, they didn't know about his lengthy criminal history, including prison time for arson. In the end, they ended up selling off their second store. Ha 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 ha. Personal story. At a party, most of my friends are there, except these 2 dudes, who were friends of friends, or something. They decide to pick on me for some reason. To be clear, one of them was being an ass to everybody, and the other was just backing him up. For whatever reason, they singled me out. A mellow stoner is an easy target for bullies, I guess. Main asshole is talking shit, buddy asshole is backing him up. I'm trying to maintain the good vibes and ignore the bullying. I'm surrounded by friends. It's just these 2 jerks throwing everything off. All of a sudden, out of the blue, main asshole literally throws a flying tackle into buddy asshole, launching both of them off the porch. They both crash headfirst into the hood of a truck parked just off the porch and are both knocked insensible. After assuring they were not dead or paralyzed, the party continued. TLDR, assholes excuse themselves from a good party, to the delight of all. TLDR, asshole guy wins a lot of money, turns out he didn't, and doesn't get cheat. This happened this week and I'm so glad. So I work where customers can win money and there is a certain etiquette there when the game is in session. Be quiet. So throughout the night there were this group of 3 good looking guys and an attractive but fake girl being super rowdy and annoying. Whenever I walked past, the one guy kept going shh very sharply just to be a dick. Every few games the same guy kept claiming he won, but it was impossible to win at the point he was doing it. He knew this, but was showing off. So it is nearing the end of the night and £300 $500 is up for grabs and the guy claims he got a win. So a coworker goes over to check his ticket. I'm thinking of course the good looking asshole wins the money. That is how the world works. He has a huge shit-eating grin and the girl instantly moves closer to him knowing he will soon have a lot of money in cash. But no, the guy misheard and ended up having 14 out of 15 numbers on his card. He was still waiting on one more number. When it comes up on the screens around the hall that he falsely claimed a win, the hall gave a sympathetic AWW as his sheet-eating grin turned so upside down I noticed it from the other end of the hall. The crowd was sad, but I was so damn thankful the asshole missed out. I have a rather slutty coworker. She plasters her face with makeup fit for a low-class hoe and claims it's well done. Dresses in a manner that basically screams whip your dicks out. I fuck in the first 5 minutes because I never learned to emotionally involve myself with another human being of the opposite sex without it centering on faking, and she doesn't like to use protection. She went through guys, faking all of them on the first date, cheating on them, and just generally being a huge, gaping slut for about 8 months, and then gets knocked up. She gets it medically terminated, and claims it will never happen again, and that she had learned her lesson. Few months of unprotected sex a few months later, and she's pregnant again. Did I mention she's only 20? The father was cheating on her, she was cheating on him. Her family disowned her for going back to the guy after he beat her up on the night they broke up, and the guy is literally the dumbest person I've encountered in 30 years of life. I tried to warn her, but she laughed us all off. Now the kid is due soon, and they don't have the money or support to care for it. Her karma will bite that poor child so hard. The day I got out of a 90-day jail sentence from drugs, my friend had to go to my girl's house. They were sort of friends, cause he was tripping too hard. He gave my girl some Ambien out of kindness. For any of you that don't know, Ambien makes you lose your inhibitions as well as make you do nonsensical things. Anyway, they ended up puking up. They lied to me about it, and just out of guess I confronted my girl. She said she admitted to it cause I was so persistent. I flipped out at both involved. Later me and my girl start talking again, and she explained that I was so persistent and wouldn't stop wreaking havoc about it. We did date for 5 faking years, that she just lied and said that she cheated cause I wouldn't lay off her sheet. I got on my knees to both her and my friend and begged for forgiveness. They both accepted, and we moved on for about a week. I knew something wasn't right. It didn't add up. I checked out my girl's phone when she stayed over and found conversations between her and my friend talking about to continue the lie that they didn't hook up, so I wouldn't go around telling anyone, especially my friend's girlfriend. Now I wasn't just set on yelling at them. I took screenshots of the conversation, threw them up on Facebook, and broke up with the stupid bitch over Facebook. Well, actually I drove over to her house to break up with her before she saw it on Facebook and broke up with her without explaining why. Figured I might as well see if she likes how it feels. My friend's girlfriend moved out plus broke up with his dumbass, and my girl, well, she was madly in love with me still, and I put her through some mental torture. Nothing horrible, just messed with her emotions as I didn't care about someone who could betray me like that and not even care. Edit/update She moved several hours away a few months after the incident, which would be a couple weeks ago, and called me, and we talked for 10 minutes, and I told her I had to go cause I had plans. True, it was 9 PM on a Friday night, but it was nice hearing her voice and I'd call her back if she wanted. She told me to fuck off and how I'm such a jerk for not spending any time tailing to her, and cussed me out till I hung up cause she's such a self-controlling needy bitch. So I blocked her. We did date for 5 years, so I will always have that in the back of my head cause I really did love her, but damn, the jealousy and slutiness was too much for me. Picking up a guy on a blind date. The moment I see him, I know I don't want him in my car. He's a big hairy man in cargo shorts and rubber boots. I'll let him in anyways, thinking well, maybe he's cool, we can be friends. So I drive to the theater anyways. On our way he asks very personal questions regarding what I shave and my bra size, as well as trying to guess my bra size. My regret being I should have kicked him out then. Instead I plot how to end the date early. We arrive at the theater, and he mentions he can't cover my ticket, and I say I left my wallet in the car and just leave. Fast forward to later that evening, I had another date, not so blind, but still we had never actually met. He lives about 40 minutes from where I am, and it's pouring out. Just as I'm pulling up to his neighborhood and start searching for the house number, difficult in the rain at night, I get a message saying he can't meet up because something came up. So my now ex-roommate decided one night to go out to the bars and got so drunk he decided to go to the next town over to their bars. Well, he walked home and wasn't too happy with me for going camping the weekend before. When he got home he walked up the stairs to his room, which was next to mine, and grabbed his gun to show some random people he invited over on his walk home. He then took a beeline to my room with the gun, and a different roommate's girlfriend was walking up the stairs and realized what he was doing and got in between my room and him. He started smashing my door trying to get in, and eventually I woke up and went to see what the fuck was going on. He lost it when I opened my door and he saw me standing there, and by this my roommates were all pulling him away from my room and ripped the rifle out of his hands and hid it somewhere in the house. He yelled at me calling me a piece of shit as they took him away and put him to bed. The next day he tried to be all buddy with me, and I pretty much said karma is a big beautiful beach and she will get hers on him. So 2 days later I got woken up at 5 AM by a loud thudding noise coming up the stairs. It was a roommate who pulled the gun on me and threatened to kill me. Well, karma got him bad. He was walking to work and looked up at the stoplight, said it was going from yellow to red, waited a second and took a step into the crosswalk. He got hit by a car going 45 miles an hour and was like, yeah, I'm gonna be rich. It was a red light and blah blah blah. Well, ours got a letter from the person's insurance company pretty much telling him all of his $50,000 in hospital expenses would be covered by them. A week after that, another letter from the insurance company now telling him, according to witness statements and a police report, he was jaywalking and the light was green when the car hit him. He is now stuck with the $50,000 in medical bills, and as a result of missing work that day he got fired. Probably not the best, but it's recent and I'm still laughing about it. Point: I work at a major home improvement store. Our competitor is a mile away. I can see it when I'm outside. So we hear, well, I'm going to $competitor all the time. A guy came in with a stepping stone a few days ago and said he needed 80 of them. Could we get a forklift to put them in his truck? So I call, and both of my forklift drivers are busy. They're sending out a guy to load them by hand. Well, the customer wasn't happy about it. I can't believe this. I'm going to $competitor. He leaves. Then he comes back 10 minutes later with a sheepish look on his face. Their blocks are 1/16 of an inch smaller on each side. I need to get them from here. I probably had a big shit-eating grin on my face as I rang him up. I ended up getting someone from another department to get the blocks with a forklift point, but no, that still wasn't good enough for this guy. What's taking them so long? I could have loaded it by now. They need to let me drive the forklift. Like, sorry, we have safety protocols to follow. Band I was in was playing a local music night at one of the bigger concert clubs in town a ways back. There were about 4 bands and a huge cooler of beer backstage for all the groups to share. One band was a hair metal 1AB group that all acted like Axl Rose, complete douchebags. They not only snagged most of the beers in the cooler, but also thought they didn't have to go on at their scheduled time, just whenever they felt like it. Normally, this would cut into the other band's time slots and force everybody else to shorten their sets, which is what they were shooting for. So spandex wearing morons finally start their set 15 to 20 minutes late, blaze through about 2 numbers, and right when they start the 3rd song, sound gets cut off, house lights come on, and over the PA we hear, coming up next my band's name. They stood on stage looking dumbfounded and pissed off, while the stage hands were telling them to hurry up and get their shit off stage so we could set up. This place was very strict about what time you started and finished, and even had a schedule posted with your name and time slot, which they took as a joke. Just imagine all these butthurt idiots with teased peroxide hair and spandex having a hissy fit. We probably played one of the best sets ever, if I remember correctly. I had this ex-girlfriend who tried to get me into open relationships and polyamory. I wasn't into it, so it ended badly after a few months. After we split, she moved in with a married high school teacher, his wife, and their 2 kids. Every Facebook or Twitter post was about how much she loved this poly life and how she was free to have as much sex as she wanted. She also took swipes at me for being close-minded. One day I went to return an old sweater she had left behind. She refused to meet me because she had an emergency. It turns out she had just been fired from her job at Walmart for making a math error. Then she dropped out of college to spend more time with her partners, only to find out that her parents had, unbeknownst to her, taken a second mortgage to pay for her now failed education. Then her partners called a family meeting and broke up with her, which also meant she had to move out. Last I knew she was a server at a frozen yogurt place. I saw her behind the counter when I went there with some school friends. Scene: high school. Wooded path that some inept douchebag who did not get served due karma running a kennel service was letting the dogs off leash and leaving their leavings there. One day another truant student started throwing the wet dog sheet at people and throwing it in people's faces before running into the woods cackling. I heard about it before I started my walk home for lunch, but didn't care as I always have my raincoat. At that time I would weave/bob out of practiced paranoia, often in response to indirect shadows and reflections, so I got to listen to excited then frustrated shouting as the easy ammunition was expended harmlessly into the brush, forcing our intrepid ambusher to sprint greater distances to find another handful. I noticed only a little piece hid my raincoat, and I got my coat washed off fairly casually. I didn't see him on the way back, but I did hear foraging noises as he was running/stomping around. Schoolmates asked what I did to get him to finally stop as he was cursing my name something fierce. I could only say who, stop what, with a non-committal, sick shrug. On the way home that evening I noticed a haggard, wet, muddy and generally disheveled caricature of the day's pup-flinging madman perk up and run into the woods as I continued on my usual path. I think he's up to something. Perhaps you should take one of the other routes today, commented another student. No, I respond as I continued on my preferred path parallel to the main path, focusing on the twisting routes that made for excellent footholds when fighting/dodging. As I drew closer to the woods, I heard a familiar curse and the steady reverberations beat of someone running to somewhere near to the normal street path outside of the forest. Penetrating into the shaded boundary of the woods, I then heard a crescendo of irregular heavy footfalls crashing through the underbrush, approaching unseen. As the cacophony, crashing, resolved into the huffing of a strained body exhaustion, another student cried out a warning, to be interrupted by an excited, a very triumphant gasp huff. Only then did I notice another shadow about to merge with mine, and anticipating a fight braced myself and stepped back, throwing my head and neck muscles bracing in anticipation of another king hit back. Choking, confused by the sudden silence caused by my presumed attacker and other students suddenly halting. I stopped, internally cursing my lapse in vigilance, vigilantly tracking shadows, and turned around to see the pup-flinging madman collapsing, doubled over, retching/driving/choking/gasping for air, hesitantly pawing away dirt/mud from his face with hands stained past the elbows, pants so saturated with mud I mistook them for shorts as they clung completely around the knees down. Distress so great that I and the surroundings are completely forgotten to him. I accidentally kicked over a crumpled pie plate with a gulping as I walked over to ask, "Hey, are you alright?" The remnants of a mud pie that was still clinging around the edges of the plate shook loose to reveal the shiny metal embossing that caught the sparse spots of sunlight as it clattered to rest under the pup minister's prone struggling form, and he violently stumbled away, wrecking uncontrollably. Still confused, I asked the stunned bystanders what happened. Behind me TLDR. Pup Meester tried to throw cold waterlogged dog pup in my face. Pup Meester forgot to close his mouth and aspirated choked on it instead. Edit. Too many tense mismatches. Edit 22 minutes later. Word choice errors. So this is kind of opposite end of the karma train in two ways. So a few years ago I was working as a plumber. I worked with another dude. So one day I lose my wallet and he finds it in the truck. I'm really appreciative and want to make it up to him. Being rural Wisconsin, the only thing he wanted was a 30 rack of Pabst Blue Ribbon. I go to Walmart immediately after work in my sheety clothes and walk to the alcohol selections. Two buxom young women were awkwardly standing nearby, and I had the impression that they had been there for a while. "Would you mind buying us some alcohol, sir?" One girl meekly stuttered. "Sir?" I thought to myself. I was 22, and the days of struggling to procure alcohol were fresh in my mind. These girls were maybe 3 years younger than I was. I laughed to myself, wondering how these women imagined me to be an authority figure as I wore a tattered t-shirt speckled with fesses on it. "No problem," I responded. Their eyes lit up and smiled. "Oh gosh, thank you," said the other girl. "We are having a party." I grabbed the PBR, and they grab a number of alcoholic beverages. I grabbed a bottle of something I thought they'd like. I go to check out and take the stuff to their car, where they meet me and promise me they're super close to 21, so it's pretty much legal. I give them my number for all their future alcohol procurement needs and carry on my way, happy that I did a good deed. Remember how I said rural Wisconsin? That's important to the story now. There's this stop sign out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. 2 farm roads that intersect and lie in the route to where I was staying from the nearest town and Walmart. At first when I moved, I always did a complete stop, checked both ways, and then crossed the intersection. Over time that became a rolling stop, then finally glance left and right as I roll through. But that day I was so happy, so content with life, I just drove through that intersection at 30 miles per hour. There's literally never anyone in that road. It doesn't matter about 2 seconds. After going through the intersection, I see red and blue lights behind me. Sheet. Guy pulls me over. It's a lieutenant. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asks, grinning. "Well, officer, I blew right through that stop sign. I only now realize my mistake." I respond. "Yup," he says. "You almost hit me actually." He gets my driver's license and runs it. Coming back about 3 minutes later. "Hey, man, I know you're in a hurry. Make sure you keep it under the speed limit and observe all road laws," he says, letting me go with a verbal warning. There is no conceivable explanation for how easily I got off, except that God works in mysterious ways. Had I not bought alcohol for those underage girls, I may well have been arrested or had my license suspended. Forward, I was about to write that I never had this happen. Then I looked hard back at my life and realized, yes, this did happen to me. I was visiting Indiana University as a sophomore from Purdue University. It was a fairly long drive to visit this school, and, as Big Ten schools go, that was our rival. But I was going there for the potential of hooking up with a girl, we'll call her Erin, I knew from high school. When I get there I go to Erin's dorm and her roommates and I pre-game a little. This is Halloween night and I didn't costume ready myself, so I asked her what she think would be a funny stupid costume I could do for the party. Her and I, being drunk, decided it's a good idea that I wear her clothes and she mine. I'm not too height different than her, 5'8" vs her 5'5", but I was a weightlifter and she was a cheerleader, so body shape was definitely different. I go to this part knowing no one besides her and 2 of her friends wearing a skin-tight cheer shirt and short, pink of course. She rebuffed on deal on just went casual. After about 30 minutes, while we were there, 2 guys, douche guy trying to imitate Jersey Shore and another dude that didn't even wear a costume, that broke into a fight. Okay, this memory is just getting too long, I'll continue if someone wants it.